Machen wir hier weiter. Gucken wir uns. Da habe ich gerade was Interessantes gesehen.
Bada bing, bada boo.
Ever
Kann ich das
since
klein machen?
Ronan, a mom in Taiwan, she's invited her daughter back to come live with her. Ever since the two have been reunited, very strange things have been go. Something happened where the mom, Ronan, could no longer take care of her daughter anymore. Her daughter's
Klein
name
hier
is
irgendwo
Dodo.
hin.
And she could
So.
hardly take care of herself, let alone make sure that Dodo is being safe and well fed. But that's 6 years ago. Ronan today, she's different now. She's ready to be a mom again. She can take care of her daughter Dodo. After 6 years of being apart,
Ah, nein, jetzt ist es ausgemacht.
obviously the initial meeting is definitely a little awkward, but there is this connection there because that's her kid. So for a little while, it seems like the two of them, they're gonna go home. They're gonna slip into a very natural, familiar family life where they
Nee.
just enjoy doing all these mundane things that they missed out on
Habe ich nicht
together.
irgendwo ein Fenster?
But then, all these strange little things start happening, and they're not little. On the very first night that daughter Dodo returns home, they hear this huge bang in the other room, and there's this sound of shattering glass. Ronan runs into the next room to
Das ist so,
investigate
dass
because
man
it
noch
sounds like a
sieht,
home
falls
intruder or
Bilder
something.
gezeigt werden.
But when she gets in there, all she finds, the floor covered with shattered glass, and there's a tiny little cockroach. It seems like the cockroach crashed in through the window, breaking the glass. Is that even physically possible? It's so strange. Later that night, Ronan notices what looks like a burst eye vessel inside of her daughter's eye, but it's very eerily shaped, like the shape of a cockroach.
How old is the daughter?
6.
Oh.
And I think if that were all, maybe Ronan would try
So
to look past
vielleicht.
it and start fresh because, there could be explanations for all of these things. Maybe the glass was already shattered. Maybe the cockroach is just a coincidence. There can be 1,001 explanations. But things start becoming unavoidable. It's not even just the small things anymore. Like, how do you explain when Dodo wakes up one day and her entire
Manchmal
mouth
esst
is
die da.
filled with teeth? She has double the amount of teeth. They're practically growing on her tongue. They're everywhere. Or the fact that Dodo, her daughter, is able to magically shut doors. She could be on the other side of the room and the door swings shut. The window's not even open. It's not a breeze. How is she doing that? And who does she keep talking to? She keeps talking to someone that doesn't
Habe ich eigentlich
exist.
das Original,
It's like she's
deswegen
playing with
entfahren.
invisible friends that aren't actually there. Yes, it's her daughter, but it's not normal. And she's confident that the real reason, the real problem here, is that Ronan is cursed. She's haunted, and this curse is being transferred to her daughter. 6 years ago, Ronan, for the sake of a YouTube video, entered this forbidden tunnel, a sacred space, and ever since then, her life has been cursed, and now her daughter is gonna die unless she can find a way to help her. And this sounds very much like the plot of a movie, does it not? And that's because it is. That is the plot of the Taiwanese horror film Incantation. The reviews for that movie read, it's terrifying, exceptionally dark. If you can't watch anything terrible happening to young children, don't watch this. It's a type of movie to break your brain. I watched it and the movie stayed with me for years. I still think about it to this day. Not in a good way. But the truth is,
Kann ich das
the movie
kopieren?
Incantation is actually based on a true story of a family in Taiwan and what happened to them when they get cursed by a demon. How they are tortured for 2 months straight until one of them ends up dead.
This escalated quickly. Ah. So, da für die Farben habe ich mir den jetzt mal
We
geholt.
would like to thank today's sponsors who have made it possible for Rotten Mango to support the PAN Foundation. They focus on accessibility to healthcare, aiding underinsured people with their out-of-pocket costs, as well as actively advocating for improved access and affordability. This episode's partnerships have also made it possible to support Rotten Mango's growing team, and we'd also like to thank you guys for your continued support as we work on our mission to be worthy advocates. As always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. This is another international case with very little resources available. We did our best to translate with professional native speakers, but of course, if there's anything mistranslated, miscommunicated, or any additional information, please let us know down in the comments. Today's case also mentions some mental health conditions, the compulsive eating of non-food items, physical assault, and a brief mention of SA.
Was
with
habt
that
ihr
being
gegessen?
said- Oh, I do actually have another disclaimer. Listen, I have a very strong appreciation for religion and cultural traditions. I think it's one of the more beautiful aspects of life and just the human experience in general. But I'm personally not a firm believer of anything when it pertains to religion or spiritual journeys. So anything said in this episode is not to push some sort of narrative or belief onto anybody. I truly have no skin in the game. I
Ich hab
just
Angst
am
davor, was sie
very
gegessen haben. Was soll
intrigued
denn das?
by a lot of different cultures and religions. There is information included that I find to be enlightening and pertinent to the case itself, and also just fascinating that I wanted to share with you, but I am not trying to get anyone to believe one thing or another or anything at all. Also, another side note, many of the gods mentioned in today's episodes, the deities, they have very complicated backgrounds on how they came to be. And obviously there's different interpretations and beliefs for each one. But I do want to mention that it does seem that at least a few of them are based off of Hindu gods. So this is, again, not me trying to erase that link or not give credit where credit is due. But I think to deep dive into the origins of each god would take a lot of care and
Ja, gibt doch
expertise, and
viele.
I'm mainly trying to include the parts that would be relevant to the actual case. So if you guys actually know more about each deity, please let me know in the comments. I would love to learn more from you guys because the internet is a tricky place where everybody disagrees a lot. So with that being said, let's
Ja,
get
ist auch
into
mal
it.
schwierig bei so
April
Themen.
11th, 2005. It's a very normal Monday afternoon, and Mr. A, well, let's call him Mr. A, is at home watching TV, and he hears this knock at his door. Mr. A is one of the few neighbors that are still around. All the other neighbors had, interestingly, packed a little bag and moved out into hotels, leaving most of their stuff behind, still paying rent. It's very odd.
What?
Mr. A gets
Okay.
up and he walks to the door, looks through the tiny little peephole, and he sees his neighbor, a middle-aged man, Mr. Wu, just standing there looking very anxious. Mr. Wu, what's wrong? How can I help you? Mr. Wu leans in closer to the door. Call an ambulance. What? Mr. A fumbles with his locks, and by the time he opens the door, Mr. Wu is gone. He looks to the right, he looks to the left. No Mr. Wu. He didn't even know middle-aged men could move that fast. That's wild. So he grabs his phone, puts on his jacket and his shoes, and he starts making his way over to Mr. Wu's house, which is at the top of a neighboring building. It's a 3-story building.
Der war
and
schnell.
Mr. Wu is at the top. That's his residence, 3rd floor. So he's running up the stairs. He approaches the door. He doesn't see Mr. Wu anywhere. He's nowhere to be seen. He presses on the handle of Mr. Wu's front door. The door creaks open, and a fly comes flying out at him. So strange. He walks inside, and once he sees why an ambulance needs to be called, Mr. A runs back out of the house. He's dry heaving on the pavement and immediately calls the police. When the police arrive at the scene, they want to know what the problem is with the Wu family. I mean, arguably, they seem very incredibly normal, if not very mundane. The Wu parents have 4 children. The eldest daughter works in Taipei. The second daughter is a nurse. The third daughter goes to college. The son, the baby of the family, works at a local printing house. They're all adults. The kids are in their 20s at this point. It's a very normal family. Until the police talk to the neighbors.
Until there
They
wasn't.
are not normal. What do you mean by that? Neighbors have been reporting hearing very strange noises coming from inside the house all night long. This loud, sometimes it's like a banging noise. Sometimes you don't know what the source of the sound is. Sometimes you do know. And then sometimes it's just the most obnoxious gong going off all night long. Which is definitely frustrating for neighbors to deal with, the constant ruckus from the upstairs residents. But the neighbors aren't even annoyed. They're not even pissed off. In fact, they're just scared.
Ja, aber ich
Something
auch.
about the noises is different, okay? Sometimes the
Was zur
family of
Hölle?
6 would sit there just splashing water on each other in silence, splashing cold water all over each other, shivering, but they say they're hot. It's weird. Sometimes the neighbors will wake up in the middle of the night to
Familienabend.
hearing someone screaming, other times to chanting. They look up at the house and, yeah, the police are like, that's not a normal place. They look at the signs posted on the windows into the house. There's a red 8 trigram symbol posted onto the window.
Oh, so ein
The 8
Schutzsymbol.
trigrams are ancient symbols used in Taoist philosophy that represent the 8 principles of feng shui. Feng shui being harmony of individuals and their environment. At its core, feng shui is about creating balance and flow in your living area, right? So the 8 principles of having good feng shui balance, oversimplified, are heaven, earth, thunder, water, mountain, wind, fire, lake, which symbolizes joy and pleasure. So they all mean something. And when you put that symbol of the 8 trigrams on the window, it typically means that whoever lives in this home is seeking protection. They likely want to ward off negative energy and spirits, which is not too crazy of a thing to want. I feel like we all want that. They see that red 8 trigrams taped to the window, which itself is very normal, standard even, but it's everything else that makes the house feel so strange. On the balcony of the house, there are these black clothes that are sticking out of the windows like flags. It does not appear that the clothes are being hanging to dry. They're hanging on sticks, just floating in the air like flags, or like ghosts wearing black clothes and hanging out of the window, whichever one you want to envision. When you step foot into the house, you hear this crunching noise, and you look down, and the entire floor is covered like a beach. But instead of sand, it's covered with salt and rice grains. The whole floor. They can hear flies buzzing around the house. They walk further in, and on the dining table, they find a whole table setting laid out. Plates, bowls. The bowls are filled with fulu, a talismanic paper soaked in water. And the plates are smeared with the main dish, the main course. Feces.
Okay, oh, bitte haben die
The
nicht die
flies are just
gegessen.
circulating over the table, but that's not the only source of the smell. Feces has been thrown at the walls, covering the walls, sliding off the walls. Not a single window was left open to let in some fresh air. Not only that, but the windows are covered in these yellowish papers taped to the windows, resulting in this severe lack of sunlight coming in, which means feces are hanging off the walls. The air is thick from the smell, not a single hint of a breeze, just still air sitting, marinating in the poop stench. And no sunlight to try and balance things out. It's dark, dingy, grimy, and the smell of feces is overwhelming. In one of the bedrooms, there's a 28-year-old woman lying motionless on the floor. Her limbs are stiff and she does not appear to be breathing. She has no pulse. They rush her to the hospital, but it is no luck. She has been dead for 2 days before the police found her body. The hospital starts an autopsy on the woman, and her whole body looks incredibly pale. There's these massive wounds all over her body, giant bruises, fist-sized, up and down her body. But more puzzling than that are these tiny circular uniform burn marks, similar to cigarette butt burns, but not really. It's much smaller. It's about the size of like an ink dot. So if you were to take the tip of a Sharpie and just hold it onto your skin, it's kind of that size. What could even cause burns that size that are that consistent and uniform
Ein
all over her body?
Räucherstäbchen.
Believe it or not, there's
Sie sagt's
another
nicht,
medical
okay.
mystery that the doctors
halt
cannot
nicht.
even wrap their minds around. Shoved into the woman's nostrils, mouth, in her esophagus, and smeared all over her skin is a mixture of urine and feces. Furthermore, her entire stomach, the only thing in there is no food, nothing but just semi-digested feces. The sheer volume of feces would indicate it was most likely human feces. So why, how, I mean, who did this to her? The police are able to confirm that the deceased woman is the eldest daughter of the Wu family, the residence that she was found in, which means the people most likely to have answers to what happened to her are her family members. But there is no trace of the rest of the Wu family. After Mr. Wu knocked on his neighbor's door, he vanished along with his wife
Einfach
and
weggegangen.
his 2 daughters and his 1 son. All 5 of them are gone. They hadn't taken any belongings, nothing. They just disappeared into thin air from this house. And there are just some places that you just do not go. In the movie Incantation, the place that you're not supposed to go is inside this tunnel in this remote village temple. But because the main character, Ronan, the mom, and her boyfriend at the time, they run a YouTube channel where they go ghost hunting, they weighed out the options and they thought, go into the tunnel to get great views or not go into the tunnel. They go into the tunnel. Ronan's boyfriend and his cousin
Natürlich.
decide, we're just gonna get the good footage.
Den
Despite
Film wollte ich auch
being
noch
warned
gucken,
by
habe ich noch nicht
locals
geschafft.
multiple times never to step foot in here. We're just gonna go and get the footage, and that's how they get cursed, and Ronan's boyfriend and cousin ultimately die. Ronan ends up giving birth to a daughter that she didn't even know she was pregnant with at the time. She has to give up custody to her daughter for 6 years because of how mentally messed up she is from everything that has happened inside that tunnel. Because again, there are just some places that you just should not go. In the real life case of Incantation, the Wu family, they travel to the Five Finger Mountain. It's called the Five-Finger Mountain because the peak of the mountain has 5 prominent peaks. It looks like the ridges of the fingers of a hand.
Ja, das war
It's
ja
a
auch irgendwie so
natural
ein
landmark, but some people don't think it's the safest.
nicht
Not just in
religiöser, so ein
terms of physical
Meditationsort.
safety, but spiritually. I mean, in many folklore, mountains are considered sacred places that are inhabited by supernatural entities, which means, yeah, you can go there to get guidance from the good supernatural entities, but when there are entities, one might believe there must be good and bad. You can't just cherry pick. According to many folklore, those who died unjustly or have unfinished business, they typically dwell in the mountains, waiting for their chance to get revenge. They may want to trap the living just due to how angry they are. And it's said that the path on the middle finger of the Five-Finger Mountain has the most negative energy. Many people experience and have reported
Okay, ich
feeling
kenne das anders.
stuck.
Aber naja.
Physically, like they feel like they can move, but their legs won't move. They feel exhausted all of a sudden, drained, but not just, oh, I'm a hiker, I'm tired. It's weird. It's unexplainable. They hear voices. They have all these unexplainable supernatural encounters on the third finger. But like I said, when there is good, there's also bad. So it works in the opposite way. Meaning some people believe, no, if you go to the Five-Finger Mountain and you meditate, you're going to get amazing guidance to
Ja, so
spiritual
kenn ich
problems
das.
that you may be having. So the 3 Wu sisters are sent to the mountain for a month to meditate. This is the real life family. 3 of the sisters, so they have 3 daughters and 1 son. The 3 daughters are sent to the Five-Finger Mountain for an entire month to meditate at a local temple.
Oh, so this is before the sister was dead.
Yes. They need to use the power of meditation to drive out the demon inside of the eldest sister, the one that ends up dead. It's going to take at least a month. They're going to stay at the temple, and they are not to come back home until they are cleansed. I mean, it's not like the sisters really wanted to do this, but they don't really have a choice. Their lives were incredibly normal until it wasn't normal, and it all starts February 2005. It starts with the Wu family's eldest daughter. So she's the oldest, she's the one that passes away, and she's the only child that no longer fully lives with the entire family. So the youngest daughter, she's in college, she lives in the dorms, but she comes home every single break. The eldest daughter, she's actually moved out completely to Taipei. She's managing this convenience store with her boyfriend. So let's just call them sister A, B, C, and son.
Okay.
Okay? She gets a call from her mom. What's going on? Hello? And the mom tells her, I'm very worried. I'm very concerned. I know that things have been happening over there with you. What do you mean? Sister A is confused. She's trying to figure out why her mom is freaking out, why she's saying, I know something's happened. Nothing has happened. I mean, absolutely nothing has happened. If something had happened, she would have called her right away. But her mom is just frantic. She's dead set that something weird is going to happen, or it's already happening and you just don't feel it. You just don't realize it. Sister A calms her mom down and she hangs up the phone thinking, okay, that was a little bit strange, but I think she's okay now. A few hours later, the door to the convenience store opens and it's her mom. The car ride to get from where her parents live on the south side of Taiwan to Taipei is a 4-hour-long drive. You just don't drop in and say hello. Her mom never does this. This is the type of visit that requires a lot of planning. You take the weekend off, you come to visit, you have an itinerary. So what the hell is mom doing here? Mrs. Wu tells her daughter, you need to come back to the family home immediately or else very bad things are going to happen to you. Listen, she must have a lot of faith in her mom because she grabs her things and just instantly leaves Taipei. She drops everything. She leaves work mid-shift to go with her mom. Interestingly enough, when she gets home, the energy in the family residence is quite happy. Everybody's happy. I mean, it's been a minute since all of them were gathered, since everybody's busy with work and school. Mr. Wu even cooked up this massive, delicious food table for the kids. And then during dinner, they start discussing what's been going on. And the Wu family, like I said, consists of 3 daughters and 1 son. The whole situation started when Sister C comes home from college for winter break, because it's February of 2005. She's normally someone who sleeps well every single night. But ever since she got back to the family home for winter break, she's been having nightmares every single night. And it's always about the third prince. The third prince?
Eigentlich gut. War er nicht Beschützer?
Yes, the third prince, according to mythology, he was born after spending 3 years and 6 months in his mother's womb. His mom was so sick of him in her stomach that she would get frustrated and, quote, pound her stomach in anger for such an extraordinary long pregnancy. And to make matters worse, when she finally gives birth to him, instead of a baby, a giant ball of flesh rolls out of her body. And her husband, the third prince's dad, witnesses all of this and is convinced that his wife just gave birth to a demon that needs to be extinguished. He grabs his sword, attacks the ball of flesh. It opens up and out comes a fully formed boy, the third prince, that can talk immediately out of the womb. Now you may be thinking, that's a pretty tough dad and son relationship to mend after your dad is adamant that you're a demon the second that you come into this world. But despite that, the third prince has a strong dedication to his family. The prince and his dad are known to fight all the time, but ultimately it seems like the third prince has a strong sense of filial piety. I mean, he is, at the end of the day, one to protect his family, which is why he is typically worshipped for protection of children and families and sometimes ensuring safe travels. The third prince deity is typically known as the patron god of children. In terms of worshipping deities, the third prince is not an intense one to worship, if that makes sense. It's just some deities are more fickle, some are more secretive than others, but the third prince, he sounds kind of chill. I mean, generally he prefers offerings, fruits, meats, nice. Duck meat he doesn't like because it's considered sacred to him, so you have to be very careful. He's also a teenage deity, so he really likes candies. And if you really want protection from the third prince, to just have a small statue of him is usually a good way to get it. He's a guardian deity, though. Keep this in mind. He's very protective. He's a protection god. Now, Sister C comes home from winter break, and every single night she's back in the family home. She's plagued with these nightmares, and she can't sleep now because she's terrified of her own dreams. The third prince is somehow popping up in her dreams, which makes it feel like somebody needs protection around here. She has these migraines throughout the day that make her drop to the floor with how intense it is. She's never had these before. She's supposed to be resting before school starts, so what is happening? Her parents suggest her to go to the temple. That's going to help get her soul back. Now, to give you some context, and again, a quick disclaimer, not everybody in Taiwan believes one thing or the other. Like, same with America, everybody has their own beliefs. And then you have people who are very extreme in their beliefs, and then some people who are a little bit more casual with it. I will say the Wu family is as extreme as it gets. They're very extreme with their beliefs. You're not going to see the extremity of their beliefs right now, but you'll see it escalate. So keep that in mind. They're like, you need to go to the temple and get your soul back. Some people believe that the soul can leave the body because of many different circumstances. We've kind of talked about this before with the microwave case. Remember?
Okay, den kenne ich auch noch
The
nicht.
soul leaves the body when there is some sort of
Oder?
trauma or
Doch,
shock,
doch, doch, doch. Den
near-death
hatten wir letztes Mal, glaube
experience,
ich, gehört.
intense fear or pain, spiritual attack, sleep or dreaming. Sometimes souls will wander out of your body during sleep, and then when you wake up, your soul can't get in and your soul is lost. They say that you can typically
Einfach
tell
verloren
when
gegangen.
someone's soul has left their body. They suddenly have a very hard time recalling specific events. They might have memory loss, or they suddenly have weakened immune systems, and they just feel this emotional numbness. They look like they're zoning out all the time. It looks like they're missing a part of themselves because their soul is missing. That is what the Wu parents believe is happening to Sister C. They encourage her, go to the local temple. They can perform this soul calling ritual to bring your soul back home, back into your body. You gotta go. Sister C goes to the temple to get her soul back, which it does seem to work, but she ends up getting a lot more than what she asks for. She states to her family that suddenly, out of nowhere, the third prince showed up again, and this time he had a divine message for her. He tells her that Sister A, the eldest sibling, has to come home immediately or else her life is in grave danger. She's the one working alone in Taipei. The family take this information incredibly seriously. If the third prince is saying that, that means he would only be saying that to protect the children of the family. He's a guardian deity after all, which means something might happen to the children. Even if the third prince didn't say anything to Sister C in the dream, the third prince even showing up in one's visions or dreams or sights typically symbolizes that the dreamer or someone close to the dreamer is in need of protection. Because the third prince, like I said, is almost synonymous with protection. This means something. The next day, after the third prince shows up in Sister C's dreams, the mom goes all the way to Taipei and gets her eldest daughter, brings her back home. On my desk, I have this inch-thick daily planner. Actually, I recently went to South Korea and got some RM researchers' planners as souvenir gifts as well. And my husband and everyone around me day to day knows that I'm super big on schedules. And
Ah, nice. Direkt
that
getroffen.
night, Sister A, she's being told all of this over dinner. She thinks it's strange, but she tries not to think too much into it. She goes to rest, and she comes all the way from Taipei, lays down in bed. She doesn't feel like the energy is that strange. I mean, she's home. She's so familiar with this place. This is where she grew up with everybody that she trusts more than anything. And she drifts into sleep. And hours later, she's awake, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Her mom slams open the door. She's been screaming all night. She runs in. What's wrong? What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. Sister A tells her mom that everything little sister said is coming true. There's this nightmare that she just had where she was essayed by a strange man and then ended up killing him, and there was so much blood and everything bad is happening. Her mom drags her out of bed and both of them kneel at the family's at-home altar to start praying. But the next night, it happens again. Another nightmare. Now the eldest sister can't even go to sleep without feeling this intense fear. She won't even sleep during the night. She dozes off here and there during the day. But that's about it. Like, think of it as naps. She hasn't gotten a good night's rest since she got home. Whenever there's a loud noise, she starts freaking out. If someone is talking in a pitch higher than an inside standard voice, she freaks out. Eventually, the eldest daughter, likely out of serious sleep deprivation and feeling mental torment, she starts slapping herself. She starts slapping her own legs, slapping her arms, and the Woos are really alarmed by this. They drag her to the temple where the youngest had gotten her soul back. And the parents tell the ones that run the temple, they think they know why this is happening right now. We understand why. Okay, so the family thinks the reasoning of all of this is because they moved the third prince statue in their house. So way before he showed up in Sister C's dreams, the third prince had his own altar at the Wu family house. They worshipped the third prince. But a while back, they had gone to a different temple, and with some guidance, one of the mediums there told the Wu family that their family situation seems unclean. He was very ominous about it. He didn't give them much more information. So the Wu parents, being firm believers, they start getting paranoid. They ask him to come to their house to exorcise the evil spirits that's making the residents unclean. And while they're exorcising the place, they move the statue. They move the altar of the third prince to a new location inside the house, but maybe they shouldn't have done that. Maybe that messed with the protection of the house somehow and made it so that another entity could enter, like a non-protective entity could enter their home. At the temple, the eldest sister was able to be cleansed by the spiritual mediums. And when she comes back home, things are normal again. In fact, after a few days, she's had zero nightmares, zero slapping herself on the legs. She's like, maybe I should go back home to Taipei. I mean, we avoided this looming tragedy. Likely it was nothing. We just needed to move the statue back. I should just go home and resume life as normal. That's the best case scenario, yes? As the eldest daughter is spending the last few days with her family, she gets this phone call. It's like a rather brief phone call. Nobody can really even make out who she's talking to or what she's saying. But by the time she hangs up the phone, she is no longer their daughter. She is no longer Sister A. She turns around and states to the entire Wu family that she is the goddess of mercy.
Wait, she hung up the phone?
Ja gut,
Yeah.
aber Mercy ist doch
Now,
eigentlich...
to give you some context, this is good and bad news depending on your own beliefs. If you do not believe in deities being able to possess humans, this is very bad news. If you do believe it, like the Wu family does, then this might be the best deity to be possessed by. The goddess of
Hört sich
mercy is
auf jeden
often
Fall nicht
described
so
as the
schlimm an.
kindest of all deities. She is the mother of compassion and mercy. She's believed to have unconditional love and compassion for all beings, even humans. She's not fickle, where, fickle deities might want more in return or set you up in some aspect. She's not like that. She's known to work tirelessly to save all beings from suffering. So if the goddess of mercy has taken their daughter's body, that means there is a divine message there for them. The Wu parents think, wait, maybe all of this going on is because our daughter is a spiritual medium, and this is the way we find out. A vessel is the spiritual medium between the deities and the humans, the so-called translators between the gods and the mortals. So when mortals, like humans, have questions, they have nowhere to seek answers. They may approach a spiritual medium and request that they ask the deities for the answer. Being a spiritual medium is typically, from my understanding, a job that calls you. You don't call the job chooses you. People will naturally find themselves being able to connect with spirits, and with further guidance or training of sorts, they can be full-fledged spiritual mediums. It's not an easy job. One medium describes it as, the first time, your body feels very warm, really hot. The energy is starting to come to your body, starting to surround you, so you feel very, very warm. Within the first 5-10 minutes, the energy starts slowly coming, and within that time, you'll know the energy belongs to which deity and what they are here for and what purpose. During the possession, you won't know what's happening until you wake up. Then you'll feel very tired afterwards. It's a lifetime commitment being a medium. It's very exhausting. Which, side note, there's actually a lot of harm when it comes to being a spiritual medium. One of the key components is, for I'm sure many reasons, spiritual mediums will feel the need to harm themselves. So while they're being the vessel for the deity, a lot of the times they'll write these talismanic papers. So these charms on a piece of paper that you take for protection.
Yes.
And they will use the blood from their tongue. So a lot of the times they'll cut their tongue and use the blood to write. But they don't feel pain when they're in this state, they say. They'll even pin flags to their skin. So you know those wooden skewers that you grill things on? I don't know if it's those that are used precisely, but that's about how thick they are. Some of the spiritual mediums will pin flags onto their back. They will pinch a piece of their lower back skin, stab the skewer into their flesh, and have it standing upright so that the flag is near their necks. And they'll pin like 5 of them, so they have 5 flags pinned into their backs.
See, I've seen that visual, but I didn't know they stab into themselves.
Yes, and then they will stab skewers through their mouth, like metal bars through their mouth. It's said that that's kind of proving to the mortals that they are a vessel, because it's very difficult to do that. It's said that spiritual mediums don't feel any pain when they're possessed by gods or spirits, and for that same reason, they tend to heal quickly and without infection. So it's a lot. Some spiritual mediums will stab their stomachs with sewing needles when they're in a trance. They'll even pierce a full metal needle through one cheek to the other, like I said. I mean, some of them have whips with needles, and in their trances, they will begin whipping themselves. One spiritual medium says, I believe it's a way the deities protect the medium by helping them not feel pain during the rituals. It's also a way that the deities show their powers to us humans. The Wu family thought for a moment, maybe this is what's happening to Sister A, their eldest, because she's banging her head up against the walls, the tables. She's using her nails to dig into her face, scratching her skin off. Her whole body looks like it's being covered in bruises now. It's like she has this crazy superhuman strength, and in order to even get her to stop, they have to tie her down with ropes, just running a rope around her until she can't even move an inch.
Wait, so she's saying that she has been possessed
by the goddess of mercy,
and she is keep harming herself.
Yes. The parents look at each other because at first they thought maybe our daughter is a spiritual medium, but this is not the goddess of mercy inside their little girl. This feels like something else. This feels like a demon. Sister A's eyes look different. I mean, they say that she starts laughing, but having these eerie bursts of laughter that sound very maniacal, and she starts dancing around her siblings, almost like she's taunting them. I am the goddess of mercy, here to quell the chaos and eliminate adversity for you. That night, the 6 of them are back on their knees in front of their ancestral tablets, their altars, praying. Another sleepless night, trying to figure out what is going on. This is when they decide, this is no ordinary possession, which means they cannot have an ordinary solution. They must go to the 5-Finger Mountain and get rid of the evil spirits for a singular month. So while the 3 sisters are gone, the Wu parents and the youngest son are left at home, alone. They decide, we need to cleanse this place before the sisters come back, because if they come back and the demons are still in this house, what is the point of them being gone for a month? According to masters of spirits, they say someone's front door can tell you a lot about what's going on inside that home. The front door is a very important boundary between the outside world and the safety of the home. It's the critical line between the 2 realms, the outside world and the inner sanctuary. It's a physical entrance, but it also has an energy border, if you will. Now, this is not an attempt to be dramatic about a literal front door. Historically, there are households that would perform sacrificial rituals to door spirits. That's what they're called, to make sure that their doors are properly managed and well protected. There's door deities that are supposed to help.
Oh. So viel Zeug hier liegen.
Guard against evil influences, but they can't be so stubborn and not letting anything into your front door, because then you're not going to get wealth and good fortune either. So it's a very tricky balance.
Ja, muss
You
gucken, wen
don't want
lässt
to
er
piss
rein.
off the door deities.
Yeah, in China you will see like they put almost like a painting stick one on each door, so there are two of them. They help you
yes.
guard the doors.
Yes.
You know?
So people will do rituals for them. And like rituals, I'm not talking weird rituals. Like they'll just offer fruits and stuff. Now, right upon entering the Wu family house, the master that they've invited to cleanse the entire residence sees a fox spirit standing guard at the door. That's what he says. Now,
Oh,
seeing
Fox nicht
any
gut.
sort of
Also
spirit
Fuchs ist
at
nicht
anybody's front door is a very worrisome sign, let alone a fox. He said a fox spirit typically is a symbol of chaos. Foxes are sly. They're mischievous little creatures. They like to get into all the little naughty things. There are some that believe foxes can predict disasters. They can tell when there's impending doom coming. So to see one at the front door, that's not a good look. But that's not even the main problem with foxes. Foxes are known to feed off of human vitality. In Taiwanese folklore, there's a tale of a village where young men kept falling mysteriously ill. Nobody knew what the problem was. They all ate different things. They're all drinking water from different streams. There's no reason for all of them to be sick. Is it the air? And the women were surprisingly fine. It was later discovered that a family of female fox spirits had taken residence nearby, and the female foxes were seducing and draining the men's vitality. Foxes may be here to cause chaos or to symbolize impending doom or to slowly suck the life out of the residents of the house. Not always, but that's how the master interprets this fox. Now, if it was just the fox standing at the front door, maybe the family would have been fine. But the master tells them, this is a house full of fierce demons. If you live here for too long, you will definitely be eaten up. You will be possessed. There's no way around it. As he's told to go further into the house, he keeps shaking his head no and starts walking out of the house.
Nicht
The
gut.
master just tries to leave. Like he U-turns after a few steps into the Wu residence, and Mrs. Wu, the mom, is not having it. She paid a pretty penny for this man to come into her home. He's gonna tell her what's wrong, and he's gonna fix it. Feng Shui, at its core, like I said, is making sure your home feels harmonious. It really depends on how deeply someone wants to take it. Some just take it purely as usage and design purposes. Yes, using a too large coffee table with sharp corners that you bang your leg against could be bad feng shui, but it's also just like a really bad design element. Or others take it a bit more seriously. Certain plants, certain placement of furniture beyond design elements either bring positive or negative energy into the home. You don't want too much pieces of furniture with sharp corners, sharp edges, because it's a different type of energy that you're welcoming in. For example, some common feng shui tips: don't keep broken items around in your home. Either fix it or get rid of it. Broken items carry broken, disrupted, chaotic energy. Don't keep the toilet lid open when you're not using it. Open toilets are thought to drain wealth and positive energy. Avoid mirrors directly facing the bed. It's said that not only does it disturb sleep, it potentially invites a third party into your marriage. Or place your desk in a position where it faces the office door, but it's not directly in line with it. If you're directly in line with it, any and all energy coming into the office, you will impact your work with. But you want to be able to see the door without being directly in line with the door, because you want to see the opportunities that are coming your way. You need a clear line of sight. But you could take it even a step further. And the belief is that feng shui can impact the kind of spirits that come into your home. The house they live in is positioned in a way where
Also
the
fürs
sun does not
Einrichten,
come
hier
in.
ist es ja an für
It's very
sich.
dark, it's lightless.
Hallo?
It has an
Da ist recht.
irregular shape, which gives it
Einrichten
extremely
ist
poor
ja gar
feng
nicht so
shui
schlecht,
right
das
off the
Feng Shui.
bat.
Es sind ja viele
It's a
sinnvolle
house
Sachen.
that basically
Räum
invites
auf,
the ghost in. But worse than
kaputte
that,
Sachen
there
schmeiß
is
weg
a
oder
road that
machst
goes
du
up to the
ganz.
front of their home.
Nicht so
They are
dumm.
at what's called a T-junction. They sit on a road, but there's also another road pointing directly towards them. A home that sits on a T-junction, the master states, is very, very bad. Because the energy is all directed to the house, and the rushing
Ist ein bisschen
energy can be
doof.
very harmful. It can bring in quite unstable spirits into the home and create a poison arrow, if you will, where the fast-moving energy is almost attacking the home non-stop. It's relentless. The The master tells the family, over time, living in a house with bad feng shui will drain your spirit. And once you're in this vulnerable, weakened state, you can easily be possessed by bad spirits. Every day that the demons have been growing, it's even more dangerous to get rid of them. You have to be very, very proactive. Do you understand? Now, side note, anybody living in a house in a T-junction, don't freak out. I think this has as much power over you as you believe it does. I would say most people that I know believe in feng shui in a rather casual, like they don't really believe spirits will come, but just the flow.
Yeah.
The flow of your furniture. They honestly treat it more like a design suggestion, so don't freak out. Nothing's going to happen to you. But like I said, this is just an extreme case with people who have very strong extreme beliefs. But conveniently, the master can fix it. For a price.
Natürlich.
He holds a multi-day exorcism. He states, now the house is cleansed. There will still be upkeep maintenance, of course, but overall, it's good now. The Woos thought, oh, well, now that you say that, I do feel more relaxed. Even our bodies, I feel like the tension is loosened that we've been holding on to. But just to make sure that the house is ready for the sisters to come home, the Wu family, they purchased a lot of the talismanic papers, the charms from the master, as well as joss sticks. Joss sticks are basically incense sticks and are often burned before a shrine. It's believed that if you have a perfumed joss stick to a certain deity, they will be pleased and give you their blessings. And even the number of joss sticks offered is meaningful. 1 stick is for worshipping the deceased. 2 for guardian spirits or for food offerings. 3 is the most common. It represents the core elements. 5 is for worshipping the deities and the elements. 7 sticks is for the sun deity. And the 9 sticks is the most auspicious, they say. It's used for worshipping Buddha's graces or guardian angels. So you burn them at the altar or near the front doors or the windows. And technically, you're supposed to use the joss sticks in a well-ventilated area. But the family decide, why don't we plug up every possible ventilation outlet and burn the joss sticks? Because that would be the ultimate, deepest cleansing. That would be the most condensed scent. And I think the deities would be the happiest. They even hung fabrics outside their house. They're described as exorcism cloths, meaning that they've been blessed and prayed upon, and it's supposed to give the person in need, as well as the property, a spiritual cleansing. It's thought that even touching the cloth can help drive the evil spirits out of you. They fill the entire apartment with the talismanic paper, the fulu, if you will, and they fill it with the joss sticks. They keep burning them. They hang the black clothes outside the window. They have the 8 trigrams posted on their window by their front door.
This is when the 3 sisters are at the mountain.
Yes.
So the father and the parents and the son is doing this at home.
Yes. To get them ready to come back. Because there's no point of them being in the mountain if they're just going to get tainted in the house all over again. And it works. A month later, the Wu sisters come back home from the 5-Finger Mountain, and the family of 6 are reunited. Everyone seems to have their lives restored. The disaster is over. Until one night, all 3 sisters lose their minds and they start chanting incantations, saying they want to return home. This is not home. They need to go to their real home. And this is how everything spirals out of control until 1 ends up dead and 5 end up missing. The movie Incantation is a found footage horror film that people genuinely thought was cursed. Even if you watch this horror movie, you will be cursed. That was the consensus. One online forum post reads, is Incantation movie actually safe for me to watch? Can the movie invite actual demonic influence into my home? Viewers have reported feeling cursed after watching the movie. They say, I just watched Incantation last night. I said the chant like 20 times. Power went out a couple minutes later. I've never been so scared in my whole adult life. Another comment reads, just watch Incantation. I'm so freaking cursed now. I think this movie just literally cursed me. The movie Incantation explores the idea of a shared curse, meaning just by watching the movie, by seeing the footage and repeating the incantation in the movie, you now share the curse. The movie tricks you into staring at this symbol. The main character tells the audience, because it's found footage, it's like she's vlogging. She tells the audience that the symbol is for blessings. She asks the audience to help save her daughter from the curse by chanting the incantation together. And she thanks everyone by wishing her daughter blessings so that she can be cured. But the truth of the movie is, the symbol, the incantation, all of it is a curse. The mother has asked the audience to repeat these things because she knows they are a curse so that they can take the burden of the curse away from her daughter. They can share the curse with the audience.
Wow.
In the real life
Ich muss den Film
case,
unbedingt sehen.
there is also a shared curse. It is that of shared delusion, collective psychosis of the entire family. So after getting back from the mountain, the three sisters start losing their minds. The family's gathered in the living room. The parents and the son are trying to figure out what to do, how to help the sisters, and also why are all three of them losing their minds? Why are they all possessed all of a sudden? They're burning more joss sticks, chanting more incantations to get rid of the spirits inside their family members. And it's in the middle of all of this that the dad turns to the rest of the family and he announces, I am the Jade Emperor. The Jade Emperor is a celestial ruler of heaven.
Gleich
He
die
has
Chef.
supreme sovereignty over all the deities, immortals, and humans. He's the one, if you remember from our baby garden episode, the Chinese zodiac animals were all in a race. He's the one that organized the race. He represents the ultimate authority over the universe. He's a deity, and he's known to be quite compassionate and fair and merciful. And now Mr. Wu claims he is the Jade Emperor, which makes Mrs. Wu stand up. I mean, her husband just lost his mind, and so did her three daughters, and so has she. She states, I am Queen Mother of the West, one of the most ancient and powerful goddesses, the Jade Emperor's wife. She has complete control over creation, destruction, death. Most of her days, she
So viele
sits there in
Räucherstäbchen.
her peaches of immortality. They have a little garden in their palace. She alone can determine the lifespan of every living being.
Wow.
Which means the dad is now the Jade Emperor. The mom is the Queen Mother of the West, the Emperor's wife. The eldest daughter is still the Goddess of Mercy. The second daughter, Sister B, claims she's the seventh fairy, the youngest daughter of the Jade Emperor and his wife.
Wow.
Then we have the third sister, the one that came home from college and started having the nightmares. She claims she is now the third prince, the protector of children, the guardian prince. Leaving just the youngest Wu family son, he looks up at his family members standing there, and he says, everyone stop. I am the drunken monk.
What?
This is another character from mythology, a monk that was unconventional in the fact that he was always drunk, but his heart was always in the right place.
Oh, I know. Yes. Okay. 济公 is the name.
So they're all good deities from what I can tell.
Yeah.
The whole family at this point believe that they're all possessed. But what are the odds that all six of them are possessed by good deities? Slim to none, that's what they think. They think there must be at least one person
One
in
traitor.
this family that has been possessed by a devil, and that is why everybody else is possessed by a good deity to get rid of that demon. And it's up to them to figure out the fake one. When the police are called to the Wu residence, the family are not found until 3 days later. So they find the eldest sister A's body, and then the family is found 3 days later in a temple about an hour away from their home. The 5 remaining Wu family members are covered in bruises, as well as the same scars that Sister A had, those circular burn marks. The police have so many questions. Sister A is dead. The whole house is smeared in poop. The rest of the family have similar burns to Sister A. What happened in the past 2 months in that house? At this point, the dad refuses to talk to the police. He states he will be haunted by demons by disclosing secrets. He's not taking that risk ever again. The police try to talk to the mom. The mom is sitting curled up in the interrogation room, and the interrogator is trying to ask her where the family has been for the past few days. We had to leave to avoid disaster. Avoid disaster? What disaster? The mother looks up and starts shouting. She seems paranoid. She keeps looking around. If you don't leave, you might be possessed. When confronted with her daughter's death, the mother just kept repeating, it's not my daughter who died, but the demon who is attached to her. The police are getting frustrated, so they try to think of something different. They bring in the Emperor's ruler, which is this square wooden stick. It has sacred titles of deities and scriptures carved into the wooden stick. It's supposed to cleanse evil spirits and block them from entering. Do they believe in the Emperor's ruler? No, the police do not, but it's only when they bring this in that everyone starts opening up and starts sharing what happened in the past 2 months.
What?
The past 2 months has been an utter living hell in the Wu residence. Each one of them becomes possessed by a deity. They all come to the same conclusion that there's just no way that every single one of them is possessed by a good deity. So there must be a demon amongst the group, because why else would they be suddenly possessed by powerful gods. They just need to figure out who is the demon. So first they start by sprinkling the floors of the entire apartment with rice grains and salt because demons don't like that. They believe the salt will purify the evil spirits and neutralize their bad intentions. They start setting up ceremonial arrangements where they place ritual objects, talismans, offering in a specific layout to expel the evil spirits. And each time they pick a new victim. They just go in circles being like, that one is the one with the demon. Neighbors said they would see this through the windows and they would hear it. They would force one of the family members to kneel down and they would just use their hands like automatic slappers, just slapping their face left and right to beat the demon out of them.
They do that to everyone.
Yes.
Including parents.
Yes. And it's not working. So they start taking rice, turning it into sticky rice, mixing it with salt and smearing it all over each other to get rid of the spirits. Still nothing. Because the indicator is the demon is gone, the rest of the possessions will be gone. But if they're still possessed by these deities, that means the demon is still here in this very living room. They start smearing each other with sticky rice, salt, but nothing. And that's when they start beating each other. They take turns. Every day it's someone else with a broomstick, with mops, walking sticks. They're using the joss sticks to burn holes into each other, like you would burn cigarette marks, but with the joss sticks. It's said that deities prefer cleanliness, even demons. I guess the logic the family comes up with is that if the spirits, all spirits, even the bad ones, hate dirtiness, that means they like cleanliness. Then if you make yourself so dirty, why would a spirit want to be in you or be around you? Why would they possess you if they hate dirtiness that much? That's how they start smearing human excrement all over the walls, as well as on the dinner plates. They splash each other with urine and feces, and when that still does not work, they resort to cleansing the spirits from within. Which I guess in that moment in their minds, it makes sense to a degree that they would need to consume the feces and urine. They start fasting. They don't eat any other food. And this is actually showcased in the movie as well, Incantation. They start starving and only feeding themselves feces. The entire family show the authorities all their scars to show the eldest daughter was not the only one injured in this mass exorcism they were trying to hold. But still, it doesn't matter. Clearly, her injuries were the worst that caused her to die. To which the mother has a theory. She explains to the detectives that the demon that possessed her daughter was successfully exorcised. Because of the exorcism, because she was the first to get possessed and had been possessed for so long, her real soul could not return to her body, which led to her death. After 2 months of torture, Sister A, the eldest, had passed. And now talking about it, the family seemed relieved. They finally got the demon that was plaguing the family. I mean, even if it results in the loss of their own daughter, they seem relieved. The police obviously bring in a psychiatrist to evaluate the family one by one. The psychiatrist states that none of them have any sort of mental condition that would set off psychosis. None of them are schizophrenic with hallucinations. Individually, they all seem like completely normal people. Completely normal people is how the psychiatrist phrases it, not me, okay? But it's when they're together for those past few months, what they all partake in, it seems like a shared delusion, collective psychosis. That's the only thing that the psychiatrist could come up with. It is the psychiatrist's belief that they genuinely believe that there was a demon inside of one of them. That is a belief that they shared. Legally speaking, the burns and beating scars were not fatal enough to cause the eldest daughter's death. Her cause of death was multiple organ failure, which was her willingly eating feces paired with her willingly starving herself, which led to her organs shutting down. The prosecutors state that it does not appear that she was forced, trapped, or bound to any of those things. She was beat, but they don't believe that she had no way out. It seems like she was as deep in the delusion as everybody else. The family members were initially charged and found not guilty of murder. Their exorcism did not directly result in her death. They were charged with then the crime of abandoning a corpse after death, but it does not appear that any of them served any jail time.
Basically, they do believe this is the actual event. Like, they all kind of felt like they were possessed, and that was the truth.
And a lot of people who know the family for, as long as they've been around, they said that they are especially superstitious. They are probably as extreme as it gets. So it's not out of nowhere it happened. It seems like it's ingrained in them. They had this very long-term belief in these types of things.
Yeah.
And just like that, after this, the family goes back to living normally. No possessions, which has sparked a lot of people to come up with their own theories, because how can they just suddenly go back to normal? Some netizens believe that they were actually possessed by spirits, and now that the demon spirit is gone, the family has naturally returned back to normal. Some neighbors believe this to be true because after the eldest daughter's death, all of them start donating money to the family to exorcise the spirits of the eldest daughter from the house, once and for all. They're like, because your daughter died in here, you need to exorcise the house all over again. So some of these people have very firm beliefs that this is genuinely what happened. Some argued one of the biggest problems here is that the family enshrined many different statues of gods at the same time, which means the gods had to compete for the incense they believe in, which then caused them to go after family members to try and gain more power in the home. One netizen comments, they were all possessed by evil spirits and demons, and that's why this happened. Then you have most people who believe they were in a shared psychosis, a shared delusion. I would say that, yeah, the family was entranced, just not by demons. One source states that the local psychiatrist actually believes the family to have been a state of mass hysteria. They state a lot of people might find it hard to believe considering how few of the family members were in the medical field. So 2 of them were studying to be
Ja, macht ja
nurses. One of them
nichts.
was already a
War ja
nurse,
auch,
the daughters.
gab es ja auch mal die
But the family has
Tanzwut,
always
wo
been
einfach alle
very
Leute angefangen haben zu
superstitious.
tanzen, bis
So
sie
that coupled
starben.
with sleep deprivation,
sinnvollste
lack of
an.
food and water, the repetition of praying at the altars. One netizen comment reads, the whole family is sick. Sometimes being too superstitious is also a disease. Another one comments, I once heard a Taoist priest say, if you feel something strange about your body, please see a doctor first. If you still don't feel well, then you come to us for treatment. So they're saying, I mean, this is a very real belief and a lot of people honor it, but this is just so extreme. Another netizen writes, there is nothing wrong with the faith itself. It can be a spiritual substance, but excessive superstition is a huge mistake. One netizen agrees, writing, faith should lead people to the right path and bring peace of mind, rather than causing trouble to others or even harming themselves or others. Another group of people believe, yes, they were in a state of mass hysteria, but it was brought on by a bad master. They likely went to a public temple in the mountain in the woods, the Five-Finger Mountain, where they think that maybe they had run into someone who does not practice these types of things well. Someone who perhaps wants a lot of money and sees this as an opportunity, a family who is so distraught by even just a few nightmares, he starts implanting all these crazy ideas into the sisters' minds before they leave. Likely the master never thought it would spiral into something like this, but it did. Then you have another group of people that think, well, aside from superstitions, let's put aside mass hysteria, some people are even more cynical of people, and they think that the family from day one wanted to kill the eldest daughter. Or at least the parents did. They tricked the other children into believing the superstition so that they could get the job done. There's really no proof behind this at all. I mean, there's no proof behind any of these theories or anything at all in this case, but they think, what if it's an expertly planned murder by the family to get rid of the eldest daughter for whatever reason? Other netizens point out how it's convenient and interesting that the family comes back to their senses after the eldest daughter's death and they're never possessed again. I would say that's a little tricky, but that's a belief that is floating out there. And lastly, a good chunk of people believe, yeah, it could also just be mold poisoning. They're saying that the apartment that they lived in was a little bit older, it was a little bit more run down, and Taiwan being near water, things get moldy. It's a very tropical climate.
Yeah, it's very humid during summer.
So people are saying it could have been some sort of toxic substance in the house. Has anybody looked into that? And they're not getting ventilation because they're closing up all the windows. They're getting sleep deprived. It could definitely be mold poisoning.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discourse about all of that, but that's the case. That's it. They just went on to live the rest of their lives. Nobody has really heard from them since. To the point where people are like, this feels like an urban legend.
So the movie was inspired by this case,
Yes,
or
inspired by the case.
really?
Yeah, and there's a lot of discourse about the movie as well, Incantation. I think it's very interesting. So some netizens have stated the message of the film is brilliant because they state it's a replication of religion and spiritual beliefs in a movie form. So if you believe in a spiritual belief or a religion in real life, right, it becomes more real to you. So same with the movie. They're saying if you say these incantations and you are a little bit more superstitious, then you're going to believe you are cursed.
Yeah.
So it really is fascinating. That's what people say. I don't know, okay? They state that the fact that everyone is in a theater chanting this terrifying curse, you could go one or the other way with it. You could go home thinking you've been cursed, or you could realize, wow, it no longer holds power. Because when all of us are chanting it, nothing happened. So there's also this discourse of a lot of these things feel very individual based. Like nobody wants to be individually cursed. But when they're doing it in a group, it feels like a crazy fun human experience activity. I don't know.
See, even like the this whole case, I just feel like as someone who's not very spiritual, it feels like, let's say the family, everything they said was true. It just feels like they're very open to suggestions. So it started with a dream, and then they believed it and they act upon it. And then they feel like the eldest daughter feel like, oh, she is possessed. And then she started having dreams. And then they took action, and then they feel like things are better. But then like something else happened. So everything's like suggestion. And then they all lost their
Eigentlich machen
mind.
die ja.
Oh, and just another quick disclaimer. Religion and like spiritual practices are different. I keep grouping religion into it because a lot of people in Taiwan consider it a religion. Some people consider it more so like a folk religion that they practice. Some consider it like a full-blown religion, so that's why. But I do think it's very interesting because I'm not a very spiritual person, but I am incredibly superstitious. And I think I force myself not to go down that path because what you were saying once you know something, you start spiraling. So I feel like if I were to talk to someone who could spiritually tell me my future or how I behave, it would just be living in my head.
You're more
Suggestible.
You're more suggestible. Like
So suggestible.
Yeah, you will start see things and feel things and think about these things like constantly in your head.
Because I know a lot of people might look at the family and think, wow, this is so dumb, but I can't even do that because I think I'm a little bit more suggestible than most people. So I feel like if I were really in that situation and I grew up in that environment with my family believing in all of this so strongly, especially parents believing it, those are your guidance figures. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yet the director of the movie once stated, when I heard the story of the real case in the news, I realized that I didn't dare to know too much about what happened, and I was surprised at how much the topic scared me. Then I realized that the fears surrounding religious beliefs and taboos are very obscure. It's something we can't shake off. We don't need to convince people that it's real. Rather, we tell them it's fake, but even then it's still scary. Why are we so scared of things we know are fake? So he's not saying the religion is fake, but the movie itself is fake. He's saying all the incantations, the symbols, they made up.
Yeah.
Someone just like whipped it out, but people are so scared, even though they're told it's fake, it's fake, it's fake.
Yes.
I wanted to put those elements into a film so that when the audiences watch the film, they feel like they shouldn't continue watching. It's very interesting. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. Please stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.
Bada bing, bada boo.
I have a question for you. It's kind of like the trolley question. Let's say that a person is stabbed with a very long knife, like a 15-inch knife. I mean, it's clear from the get-go that if this person doesn't get medical attention immediately, they're gonna die from their injuries. It's that long of a knife. So they get rushed to the hospital. But at this hospital, the doctor that's supposed to save their lives puts them on the operating table, yanks out their knife without a care in the world, and just watches them bleed out. Whispers in the patient's ear, "Walk it off, you'll be fine." If that person on the table ends up dying, who do you think is the killer? The person that stabbed them, or the doctor that did everything to make sure that they did not survive?
Both.
Or both?
Beide?
Has that happened? That's kind of wild.
Basically, it happens in this case. Not, you'll see. It's not the same series of events, but you can see the clear killer, you can see the doctor, you can see everyone in this one. The police had given Sora's mom a very strange request. Imagine the police call you and they're like, "Hey, I need you to go to the store and buy me a box of crayons for the investigation." You're like, okay, that's really weird, but if it's gonna help with the investigation, obviously you're gonna do it, right? So Sora's mom goes to the store and she's picking up a box with the most color of crayons, like the most variety of colors, for her 30-year-old daughter who is with the investigators right now. She's thinking, okay, maybe this is gonna be the end. They're gonna ask for this one more thing and everything will blow over and I can have my daughter back. Her daughter had been through enough. Sora had gotten out of the psych ward at the hospital recently, and hopefully when all of this is over, she would be on the path to healing. So she brings this little box of crayons to the police station, and she watches as the investigator rips them from her hands, throws them on the desk in front of her daughter's Hora. Here, take these, and draw it. Excuse me? He threw her a sheet of A4 paper and a ruler. You're saying he assaulted you. He's saying he didn't assault you. You have no proof, so prove it. Draw his private parts.
No freaking way.
If you can draw it identically to his real-life private parts, we'll investigate him further. So make sure you get it perfect, though, in terms of length and in width in millimeters. We want it precise. Oh, and the color. Your mom brought you some crayons. So if this truly happened to you, you should be able to draw it from memory. Unless you're lying about it.
You're being for real?
I'm being for real.
This is what police said.
In South Korea, yeah. Yeah. Sora is kind of glancing around the station, the same exact reaction as us, I'm sure. I'm sorry, more visceral, I'm sure, but in the sense of like, okay, is someone gonna pop out and be like, just kidding, we're gonna put them in jail for what they did, don't worry. Is this some sort of sick joke? Nobody popped out. Sora would end up grabbing those crayons despite re-traumatizing herself to the torture that she endured for the past 3 months. And she thought, if I just do this one thing, the police are gonna take me seriously. They're gonna know that I'm not lying, right? Instead, what happened was, when she was done drawing, another detective came up to her and said, hey, take off your hat. I wanna see the face of the girl who slept with 12 people. She was assaulted by 12 people. Another officer said to her,
What the fuck?
you were assaulted by 12 people? Well, you look strong. Why are you acting like that over 12 people? Did you love them at least? I mean, can you say it wasn't bad? Like, was it at least a little good? Some girls are out there making really good money by sleeping with like 30 to 40 clients a day. So, I mean, it's just 12. It's like, the world's not over. They even said, you know that supermarket family, the family that owns the supermarket down the street? Their daughter was also essayed. But look at her. She got over it. It was just like a passing storm for her. She's living well with her family. I mean, you need to work on getting better and getting used to society.
Was zur Hölle?
After walking out of the police station with her mom, Sora would bolt. She ran and threw herself into oncoming traffic at the busy intersection right in front of the police station. She wanted to die in front of the police station who refused to take her seriously. She wanted the world to know what happened to her. The police refused to investigate the Korean entertainment industry. 12 male casting directors on the set of famous K-dramas had harassed and essayed her. They, quote, passed her around as if she was some sort of object that they had power and control over. They humiliated her, threatened to assault her with broken glass bottles, burned cigarettes on her face, and set her house on fire.
Bitte was?
By the end of this case, Sora will die. Her little sister will die. And their father will die. And the perpetrators are still working in the Korean entertainment industry.
Boah.
As always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. It's a very weird time to bring this up, but I do want to briefly mention that I am very grateful for the people that we work with on the Rotten Mango team. I mean, the amount of passion and dedication that they approach just every single case and every single story with is incredible, and I feel so lucky to have this team, and we're still growing and learning every day. But for today's case, one of our researchers who's based in Korea was actually able to connect with the victim's mother. They met in person, they shared a cake together. We didn't want to push her to talk to us about anything in particular. Our researcher didn't show up with a list of questions. We just wanted her to feel comfortable, and I think even just for one of us to be in her presence and to see the pain that she very bravely carries around with her, and just to get further insight on what her fight for justice has been like, it's given us a profound understanding of this case. And yeah, So her name is Mrs. Chang, but we're going to call her Mrs. Yang because they're the Yang family and I want it to be a little bit easier to understand. But please leave some supportive comments as we're going to be translating a lot of the comments into Korean for her to get some strength from you guys. I just want her to know that we're thinking of her all the way in America. Oh, also she has a YouTube channel where she posts updates on the case.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's a one-man show. She does one-woman protest. She runs her YouTube channel by herself. I'm going to link that in the description, so please go show your support there too. I think it would mean the world. So with that being said, let's get into it. The morning of August 28th, 2009, Mrs. Yang, so Sora's mom and Sora, they were touring homes for the family. So it was going to be Mr. and Mrs. Yang, Sora, and her little sister Sojung. Sora was no longer working on the sets of K-dramas. It's not something that they would ever bring up in the house, though. And Mrs. Yang was just really proud of her for this new direction that she was going in. She was working on getting her real estate license while working at this fried chicken shop on the side. At home, she would make these rings and these pins. She earned her bead crafts license and sold her little pieces at little markets. She even had her nail art certificate. So it's a lot of different avenues of passions, yeah, but Mrs. Yang was in no rush to tell Sora, like, pick one, you know? She wasn't thinking, you gotta pick a career. She just wanted her little daughter, Sora, to be happy. She had come such a long way. After looking at houses, Sora and her mom, they're grabbing this quick bite to eat. So here is Sora putting food on her mom's spoon, urging her like, eat, Oma, making sure that her mom is getting a variety of all the side dishes, of all the greens, of all the nutrients. And it used to be the other way around. Mrs. Yang used to be the one that was always making sure that Sora was eating, even preparing all of her favorite foods to try and get her to take another bite. Probably the most vivid memory that Mrs. Yang had was like 3-4 years ago. She was so excited to see Sora that day. She wanted to bring her all of her favorite dishes. So she woke up early in the morning, went to the market, picked out the freshest fruits. She inspected every single berry to make sure none of them were bruised or smushed or squashed. She picked the apples, and she knows which ones are going to be crisp and sweet. Like after 30 years of being a mom, she's a professional at this. Then she rushes to a few local bakeries, asking, do you have fresh batches of this bread? This was Sora's favorite. And lastly, she timed everything perfectly. She was going to see Sora at, let's say, 1 p.m. She found a chicken shop nearby. She was going to go and pick up the fried chicken at 12:45 p.m. So by the time that she rushes to Sora, the chicken would still be crispy and hot. And Mrs. Yang remembers setting out all the food on the table. Hurry, eat while it's still hot. Come on, it's your favorite chicken. Here, eat the wing, it's your favorite. And she's putting food onto Sora's plate. And Sora was just picking at it in her hospital gown. The ones that they give all the psych ward patients. And Mrs. Yang is just sitting there anxiously waiting for her to say something, anything. Sora looks at her and says, Mom, I think I was raped. Mrs. Yang is like, okay, let me fight this memory out of my head. It is not something she wants to think about anymore. She wants to focus on Sora being healthy. I mean, it's been 4 years since that fateful day, and Sora has been getting better, right? And they're looking at houses, they're going out to lunch together, and then snap. After looking at houses together and grabbing a quick bite, as they're walking down the street, Mrs. Yang's slipper strap snapped. Like her little flip-flop snapped. And there was just something about that day. It felt like some sort of bad omen. And so Mrs. Yang grabs Sora's hand, starts dragging her broken slipper across the pavement, half walking, half sliding to the nearest shoe store. And she looks at her daughter and says, National Treasure. That's her nickname for her. Let's make it a shopping trip. Okay, let's both pick out a pair of shoes while we're there. So you pick a cute pair and I'll pick a cute pair. Mrs. Yang chose a pair of yellow slippers. Sora chose silver ones that were very sparkly. And as they're checking out, Sora looked at her mom and said, Mom, if I don't wear these, are they your style? Would you ever wear these? Sora's mom thought it was kind of an odd question to ask, like, honey, we have very different feet sizes. How could I wear your slippers? Okay. After buying the new shoes, Sora told her mom, I just need to run by the house real quick and feed the dog. Mrs. Yang had a few other errands to run first, so she says, okay, be safe, and she watched her daughter walk off. Sora would never wear the silver shoes. She walked directly home and jumped from the 18th floor of their apartment building in Seoul. She left a note that read, "I was their sexual toy. Death is the only way to live." When Sora's mom heard of her eldest daughter's death, she was so shocked she didn't even cry. She felt like she was in a trance. She wasn't even in her own body. I mean, the first night in the house without Sora, Mrs. Yang just stared at the silver shoes that she would never get to wear, and she thought to herself, I should have felt something was strange when my shoe strap broke. And she blamed herself. She said, why didn't I know? Why didn't I know anything, even though she's my daughter? In Korea, there are some gifts that are avoided for superstitious reasons. I was always taught by my parents that when I give someone a watch, they have to at least give me $1. Because now it's no longer a gift and it's an exchange of goods. Because a gift of a watch or a symbol of time is a very bad luck. It's like I'm telling the person I'm gifting it to.
So in Chinese,
Yes.
gift a watch is 送钟. It pronounced exactly like seeing someone's death. Like someone died, you take
Witness.
them to 送钟, like through the whole process of that. That's why the words they pronounce exactly the same. That's why you can't give that.
Ist das ungünstig?
Wow. Okay. So I was always taught by my parents, it's like you're giving a symbol of like your time is running out. It's like a reminder, right? When I gifted my parents all watches for their 60th birthday, they both wired me like $1 because I was in LA. And you're not supposed to gift empty wallets. So if you want to buy your girlfriend a wallet, you have to put at least $1 or $5 in there. Because if you give someone an empty wallet, you're wishing them a future of emptiness financially. And shoes, if you gift someone shoes, it's also customary for them to give you $1 because shoes represent the end of a relationship. Usually in romantic partnerships, it's a breakup. It means that you wish the person would walk away from you. Sora's mom felt like she should have known better. And I think a mother's guilt is so painful to witness because how can you tell a mom that it's not their fault? Most moms feel responsible for anything and everything that happens to their kid. So yeah, Sora's mom was sitting there staring at the silver slippers, wondering of all the ways that she might have been able to prevent this, not knowing that 6 days later, her youngest daughter would also be gone. In a single week, she would lose all her children. As a mom, Mrs. Yang probably spent a fortune on shoes. She was never really upset by it though. So, as kids age, they outgrow their shoes. We're going through the same thing right now with our nieces, constantly outgrowing clothes, shoes. I mean, it never lasts. They'll get a fresh pair for Christmas and before you know it, their feet have grown so much that you can't even force it into the shoe. And it's frustrating because my sister is like, man, these shoes are practically brand new. It's like there's not even wear and tear. Sora never had that experience. Sora would be running through town with friends, laps around the playground, up and down the neighborhood, up and down the stairs. Her shoes, the soles would be falling out before her feet even outgrew them. And Mrs. Yang never complained. She loved every single aspect of being a mom. Like when Sora had turned 100 days old, this is a really big deal in Korean families. It's called the pegil. Mrs. Yang stayed up all night making 100 red bean rice cakes and handing them out to her neighbors. Nobody really does this anymore. It's really time consuming and people just think it's one of those old traditions, right, back in the day. But it's supposed to be for good luck. And Mrs. Yang was like, I'm gonna do anything for my kids. And I think it worked. I mean, it really worked. So by the time that Sora is 4, she's basically using all of the big words in Korean. She was even going to an English school, a Hanja Academy, I think is what it's called.
Traditional Chinese words?
Yes, the Chinese characters, right? Academies. In kindergarten, she was like the little librarian of her class. She would read books to her classmates that couldn't read yet. After school, she would take taekwondo lessons, then it turned into piano lessons. So I don't know, can you really tell me the rice cakes didn't work? I'm just kidding. It's good parenting. But Sora was just really a unique case. Her IQ was tested later to be 157, which is considered highly, highly, highly gifted.
Wow.
To put it into perspective just how smart Sora was, one of Sora's teachers approached Sora's mom one day and said, this teacher's a little bit of a superstitious lady, which who's not these days. And she said, can I ask for Sora's exact date and time of birth? My daughter-in-law is giving birth, and if we can try to plan a C-section for the exact time that Sora was born, I would very much like that. implying that Sora was developing so quickly. And this is a teacher who's seen generations of kids come through. She's like, there must be something in the birth charts. Something, because this is crazy. So as Sora's growing older, she actually grew more into this very reserved intellectual type. She would spend most of her time head buried in a textbook. She was never late to a single class. Perfect attendance. Even later in college, when a lot of girls were finally out of the control of their parents' homes, you know, they want to like experiment with the way that they dress, their makeup, their hair. Sora is like t-shirt, jeans, let me just get through my studies. But back when Sora was 4, Mrs. Yang had given birth to Sojong. And she was the opposite of Sora. And I'm laughing because it kind of reminds me of me and my sister. She could not sit down to study. She would be dancing all over the house, stepping on Sora's homework. I mean, when she finally burned off all the energy, she would knock out. She would just be dead asleep on the couch. You could not move her until the very next morning, and she would literally be doing her homework during breakfast and on the bus on Sora's back because she just was not studious. She was like this free spirit of the family. She wanted to just explore, and she would secretly bring home stray cats and dogs. Imagine you come home after a long day of work and you just hear meow. You're like, Sojong, what is that? Why is there a noise coming from your room? And it would just be like another little kitten. And Mrs. Yang let her keep all of them.
Wow.
Yeah. But the two sisters, they truly could not have been more different. I mean, just can you imagine how fun their house must have been? Even like the bickering of Sojong dancing around and Sora's trying to focus on her homework, and then there's like 5 cats in the background knocking glasses off tables. I feel like the family never had a boring day with the two. Also, Mrs. Yang never called them by their names. She called them National Treasure 1 and National Treasure 2. So in Korea, all the national treasures, they're numbered. So this is a cute nickname that she gave. So it's like 1 and 2. And in 2004, after graduating college, Sora's 29 and her little sister, Sojong, is 25. So they're both kind of in this phase of life where they're thinking, you know, we should experiment with the possibilities. This is our time before we really settle into a career. Like, we're toying with the ideas of what we want to truly do. Sojong turns to Sora and says something along the lines of, 언니, like, we're both bored, right? Why don't we try this job together? It's a bit far. It's near Busan, so 4-hour drive, right? But we can get a place there together and be extras on all these dramas that are filming there. There's like 10 of them filming there right now, and they're all looking for extras. It'll be fun. We can get our foot in the door, and if we like it, maybe we can, you know, level up to like a supporting role and then go bigger and bigger from there. I mean, it's just a small gig. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and we just come back home. So at this point, Sojong had become a famous idol's backup dancer. So she's already kind of in this entertainment industry. And it seemed like a very natural suggestion.
Oh,
The
mein
two
Chat hat sich
sisters, they pack
aufgehangen.
some of their clothes, they leave for the very southern coast of Korea.
Nein.
And Sora
Oh
actually got a
je.
bit more acting gigs than
Noch
Sora.
jemand da? Mein
Since
Chat
Sojong
hat
was
sich
still
aufgehangen. Ich habe gar
dancing,
nicht
she
gesehen,
had a
dass
little bit
jemand
of conflict in
reinschreibt.
her schedule. It wasn't very open. Meanwhile, Sora was like, okay, let me just take this because I'm pretty free the next 3 months. Mrs. Young didn't really like being separated from her girls, but she was really proud and happy for them. She said, I was proud and arrogant. As proud as any mom in Korea who felt like they had the whole world. 3 months later, that world would come crashing down. Sora and Sojong were back home and something had changed. It's not even one of those instances where Mrs. Young can sit the girls down and be like, what's going on? Did you guys fight? There's tension. It wasn't even like that. It was such a drastic, scary change. Mrs. Young was lost on how to even handle this type of situation. It's like Sora had turned into a completely different person. The minute she walked in through her family's home doors, she took off all of her clothes. She was unclothed, pacing around the house, grabbing a knife and carving the words die, die, die onto a wooden tray. Mrs.
Die
Yang
Technik
tried to talk to her,
begeistert. Das
trying to get her
funktioniert
to
nicht.
open up and tell her why she's behaving this way, but Sora would cut up furniture. She would ransack the house. She kept saying, someone is watching me, someone is watching me. The family felt like they were in over their heads. Like, how do they even help Sora? She will not communicate with them. They don't want to push her.
Ja, Zani, bist
They
du
don't
noch
wanna
da?
scare her.
Sorry,
They
ich
don't
habe
wanna
meinen Chat
stress
nicht
her out even
gesehen.
more. They're just trying to take it day by day,
Das hat irgendwie nicht
second by
funktioniert.
second. But it really was unsettling. Mrs. Yang said, even though she was my child, I was scared. Every morning, the Yang parents and Sojang, the little sister, they would wake up feeling this
Timing
like
wieder.
anxiety on their chest. They don't even know what the day had in store for them. Most days, they would walk out into the living room and all the furniture was somehow moved in the middle of the night. Their couch was now standing on its side, leaned up against the back door. Their TV was in the kitchen. These are pieces of furniture that would take multiple people to move, but Sora had silently moved them in the middle of the night. Sometimes they would watch
So,
her
jetzt sollte es vielleicht
obsessively roll
funktionieren.
up tissues and stick them into any little crevice or hole in the house. She kept saying someone was spying on them with hidden cameras. Someone was watching them.
Ja, okay.
She was incredibly
Chat geht wieder.
paranoid.
Nicht
Sora would
aufgepasst.
come out of her room naked, chanting, "I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you." It's like she was in a trance.
Ist das die
Like she
richtige
was possessed
Größe?
by someone.
Nee.
I mean,
der
she felt like a
den Strich
stranger
doch
to the
dicker
family.
gemacht.
She would repeat these very violent words that they had never, ever heard come out of her mouth. Like, she's not even the type to watch violent movies or shows. Not saying that there's a link to like violence and that, but it's just so startling. Like, this is a girl that loves to read books and plays the piano. And now, after 3 months of acting on K-dramas as an extra, she's come back and she's having a full psychological meltdown. Every single day, the family used every second to try and brainstorm of all of the ways that they could help Sora. But like, is there really a perfect way? Maybe if you're a trained psychiatrist, you would know better. But for the family, it's a very tricky situation of if we don't do anything, clearly it's going to get worse. And Sora is obviously in some sort of pain for her to be acting like this. And if we do something, it might push her away further. So we need to make sure whatever we do is the right choice. If we try and take her to a therapist right now, what if she rebels, runs away, and we can't even find her? There's nothing we can do. She's 30. The police aren't going to do anything if she's a runaway. Soda's behavior would only get more alarming. She would be sitting down, staring at a wall, when her phone would ring. She would get angry and tell her mom, "I have to go to a shoot. I'm going to go to a shoot. I have to go." She would bolt out the door before her mom can even stop her, before anyone can stop her, because they clearly don't want to let her out of the house. And for days, she would be missing, and the family would try and reach out to her, calling around, asking if anyone had seen her, trying to get in contact with her because they're so worried. I mean, there was no way that she was working in this state, but there was also no way of finding out where she was. A few days later, she would return in a state of just complete disarray. Her hair would be ruffled up, her lipstick would be smeared. They were so lost. How is this the same Sora that we knew for the past 30 years? 30, not even like 5, 30 years. Like, this is her whole lifetime, and just she's, with the snap of a finger, a completely different person. And then one day, Sora tried to physically attack her younger sister, Sojang. All the nurses on that hospital floor knew who Mrs. Yang was. She had been at the hospital every day for the past week. Every single day she had been there. She would walk in, she would head straight for the steel doors of the waiting room, but instead of pulling on the handle, she would sit near the doors, tilt her head down, and silently cry. Sometimes she did this for an hour. Sometimes it felt like she was there all day, to the point where when she would get up, her legs would ache from sitting in the same position all day. She would have to grab the wall to support her as she walked out. She didn't ask the nurses if she could see her daughter. She knew the rules. For the first week, the hospital focuses on stabilizing psychiatric patients. They will not allow any visitors because they just don't know if the patient is going to have some sort of reaction to that person or some sort of reaction to anything that they say. They're trying to avoid taking 1 step forward and 5 steps back. But for 7 days, Mrs. Yang sat there every single day, knowing that she would not be able to see her daughter. She's not even trying to. But she just wanted to be there in the only way that she knew how at this point. And it was just to show up. I'm sure to a degree she felt some sort of guilt as a mother for having her daughter admitted involuntarily to a psych ward. And I just want to make it very clear. This is a very serious, very hard decision for her to make. This is not her saying, "Oh, I just can't deal with it anymore, so let me just bring her to a hospital." This was arguably the best choice that Mrs. Yang had at her disposal. She can't bring Sora to a therapist, even if they can force her to sit through a session. After an hour, what? They all go back home? And everyone just hopes that Sora doesn't run away or doesn't try to kill Sojang again? Mrs. Yang was just desperate to help both of her kids. And so when the 8th day came, she went and bought Sora's favorite chicken and all of her fruits and all of her favorite bang, her bread, and she anxiously set up in the waiting room. She spent the entire day getting ready for this moment. It was in November, so she was even like hugging the chicken close to her to keep it warm as she ran to the hospital. And she's telling her daughter, like, eat while it's still hot. Moms always say this, but Mrs. Yang said, I know it's my kid, but she's so beautiful that day. So pretty, but also so sad. It was like in the waiting room, she said this dark cloud was just hanging directly over Sora, and it looked like it was following her around, and she just wants to like break up the cloud on top of her, but there's no way she can do that. So Sora is just poking around at her food, and she says, Mom, yes, I think I was right. Mrs. Yang sat, completely frozen, while her oldest daughter, her national treasure number 1, cried and told her the horrible things that 12 men had done to her. By the time Sora was done sharing her story, the chicken had gone cold, and Mrs. Yang's heart shattered in 1,000 different sharp, jagged pieces that felt like they were ripping into her from the inside. She felt, as a mother, just pure, unadulterated rage. Through Mrs. Yang's patience and encouragement, Sora starts to trust the medical staff. Sora would tell them bits and pieces of everything that's happened. She would call her mom. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Sora couldn't sleep, and she would ask the nurse for a phone, and she would call her mom and tell her everything in bits and pieces over the phone. Mrs. Yang quit her job to be there at any given time, any given hour for her daughter. Whatever her baby needed, she was going to do it. Mrs. Yang constantly met up with the doctors in charge of Sora's care. They informed her that Sora had contracted chlamydia, which is a bacterial STD. Thankfully, it's treatable and curable, but the part that worried the doctors was Sora was at a stage where it was very painful for her because of the chlamydia. There was pus that was exiting, and Sora did not register any of that pain nor any of that discomfort. It was like she was in a trance. She was out of her body. She could not feel the pain of her body. So while chlamydia was an issue that they're working on, it seemed like the more worrying problem on hand was she's showing just extreme symptoms of PTSD. Sora was assaulted, abused, humiliated, and potentially drugged for 3 months by 12 men. It wasn't at once, it wasn't a single event, but it was a consistent schedule of abuse. She did not speak out because they threatened to kill her, but more importantly to Sora, they threatened to do the same thing to Sora's little sister and then kill her. In Korea, I'm not sure the exact verbiage for these positions here in the US, but in Korea, they have something called extra directors. So it's not saying like, oh, this is an extra director, like another additional director, but they're like casting directors, but they don't work with casting the main crew. So they're not casting the main lead or the supporting roles, but they more so focus on casting a bunch of extras. You know, the scenes in the K-dramas where they're in a coffee shop, they need people in the background. Or when they're walking down the street, it can't be a ghost town. But they also can't use the same people in all the shots because what is the population of this town? Like 5 people, right? So they have to organize all of these different schedules, all of these different people to appear on set, be dressed in the same. Like if the drama is set in winter, everyone's got to wear winter clothes. They got to know what positions to take, what kind of actions to do. And oftentimes, these extra directors are also in charge of the minors on set. Not all the time, but I think legally minors have to report to someone who knows all the child labor laws and follows the specific regulations that the government has set. And for some reason, it often falls on these positions. So these extra directors, they will often have assistants, supporting directors underneath them, managers, as well as production managers that work below them. Just for simplicity's sake, we're going to call all of the positions casting directors. They all have immense superiority over Sora and the extras on set. They're like top of the food chain. They have the power to take away jobs and to create them. So moving forward, I'm just going to be using the word allegedly. It is in my personal deep opinion and feeling that these men are absolutely guilty. But since there has been no official conviction, I will be using the word allegedly because it seems like these In
Das
my
ist
personal
okay.
opinion,
Ich glaube
nasty
schon.
scum of the earth pigs
So
are
müsste es
very,
funktionieren.
very lawsuit happy. Yeah.
So besser? Moment,
The
warte, ich mache
predators
mich mal ein
have been
bisschen
named in an
lauter,
article
oder?
that I will
Ist das
also
hier
link
die
in the show
Richtung? Oder?
notes.
Das
The
war
series
leise.
of assaults is said to
So.
have been triggered by a
So
casting
muss es
director
gehen.
by the name of
Ich sehe
Lee
mich gerade, ich
Kwang-soo.
war sehr leise.
Now, since he has since changed his name to Lee Yonggwang, I'm going to call him Lee Yonggwang so that we know his real name, right? He was working at the World Casting Net Company in 2004. He was Sora's director on set for one of these dramas, and allegedly, he wanted to impress his boss by committing crimes. And allegedly, he drugged Sora's coffee and gave Sora to his boss as a gift. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if the boss was like, what's wrong with this kid? I mean, apparently not, because he wasn't fired. Or if the boss did something to Sora, I don't know. But this seems to have been some sort of starting point to everything. Because after work one day, it seems that the Lee guy, that director Lee, would initiate a hueshik of sorts. And a hueshik is when all the managers and the subordinates, they go out to eat and they primarily drink after work. This is off the clock hours. You do not get paid for these gatherings. And if you're not one of the managers, it's literal hell. You have to sit there and laugh at all their unfunny jokes while you pour their drinks as if you are not just as qualified, if not more qualified, to do their goddamn jobs better than they can. I feel it's probably the bane of existence for most working women. If you go and you do what is asked of you, it is humiliating, it is degrading, it is oftentimes dangerous. These managers will force female subordinates to drink without concern for their well-being or safety. I mean, just even the principle of it is like, why am I here pouring you a shot of soju and laughing at your stupid jokes and complimenting you when everyone in the office knows that you are a blubbering, power-tripping idiot that doesn't know how to do anything correctly? And if you don't pour these egotistical managers their drinks, you risk the chance of never getting promoted, because now the managers will tell their superiors that you're, quote, difficult to work with and you don't have the drive or the team spirit. It's alleged that Sora was at one of these events when she became very, very drunk. Now, this is where I want to preface something. I think if anyone thinks, even for a split second, well, why was she so drunk? I think that would be a very good moment of self-reflection, and I would like to assist in that self-reflection. Firstly, if Sora or anyone that you were out with, like let's say someone you're out with, whether it's a work colleague or a friend, if they're that drunk, yeah, you could be like, maybe they shouldn't have gotten that drunk. But the human decency aspect is you just want to get that person home safely. That's it.
Ja,
That's
das
the only thing you care about in that moment.
sollte
You're
man
not thinking,
schon.
why are they so
Zumal man muss ja
You're like, okay, let me
mittrinken.
make sure that you don't lay on your back so you don't choke on your own vomit, and let me make sure that no predator gets to you. That's going to be the main thing to think about. Secondly, there are allegations and suspicions that Sora was roofied during these team building meetings. Sora was said to have not been much of a drinker, and when she did drink, she knew her limits really, really well. I can kind of resonate with that, because
Hallo,
it would
Max.
be the other way, like, oh, if you don't drink, you shouldn't know your limits. But as someone who doesn't drink often, I'm like, okay, I know I'm okay with like one glass of wine. And then I'm like, everything after that is a hard limit, you know? And she was very, very mindful to never cross these boundaries. I don't even think that she would drink like a full glass of wine, because it's alleged that after just one sip of beer, people started witnessing Sora behaving very drunk. So this is not normal.
Nee,
But let's
eigentlich.
argue that she was never drugged. Still, one of the main problems at these so-called team building events is that managers will push and shove drinks down your throat with this passive-aggressive hint that your job is on the line if you're not fun and letting loose with the team. So either way, I don't think that we should blame Sora at all. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't matter how drunk Sora was or wasn't. The night of August 10th, 2004, Sora was drunk, and at around 2 a.m., Director Lee pulled her into a video room. This is already so shady. Video rooms in Korea are places where you can rent these small, tiny rooms that have like a love seat. It's like a tiny little couch. You watch DVDs and stuff. It's a quiet, private room, and it's generally known as one of these places where teenagers go to rendezvous, if you will, since most likely teenagers can't afford like hourly motels yet. Director Lee threw her on the chair, and it was clear that she was unable to resist. He assaulted her. Just 8 days later, he got Sora drunk again, dragged her to a motel room. Sora was clearly unable to resist, and he assaulted her. Just 5 days
Schwanz.
later, he dragged her into another motel room, strangled her, took off her clothes, and this time Sora was conscious enough to resist. And when I say resist, I'm like, this was, all of it was essay, okay? Sora was conscious enough to resist and made it clear once more, for the third time, this is not consensual. She resisted physically and he threatened her, allegedly saying something along the lines of, I will break this glass soju bottle, cut up your face with it, and then use it to assault you. I will put out cigarettes all over your face unless you listen to me. He assaulted Sora once more, sometimes even punching her in the face, kicking her in the stomach, and slamming her up against the walls during the assaults. It's alleged that director Lee went to tell his buddies on set what he had done. Because, what a thing to be proud of, right? And they all decided, we're not going to go to the cops with this. No, we're all going to commit the same crimes. Casting director Yang Tae-geum allegedly locked Sora in an unknown motel room near the set. He dragged her into the bath, sprayed water all over her mouth and private parts with the shower head, took off her clothes, laid her down, assaulted her. He said to her, if you don't listen, I'm going to throw you in my trunk and push you into the Han River. Side note, Sora was young enough that Yang Tae-geum actually went around telling his friends that she was his niece and that he was taking her under his wing in the industry. That's how old he was. It's alleged that he even forced her to go on a 3-day staycation with him where he continued to assault and torture her for 3 days straight. Then it was claimed that they, quote, passed her on to casting director Kim Sun-mo. He was working as a manager for the executive department of World Casting Net Company. October 13th of 2004, it said that Kim dragged a drunk and semi-conscious Sora to a motel while telling her, if you don't follow me, I'm gonna kill you. He locked her in the room, pushed her down, and threatened to light her pubic hair on fire. Then he assaulted her, which he allegedly bragged about to casting director Kim Yo-won. That's his new name, by the way. He also changed his name. It used to be Kim Do-hyun. He was also married at the time of the assault, this new casting director. It said that he worked as a casting director and manager at the World Casting Net Company. In October 26, 2004, he got Sora drunk to the point of being barely conscious, dragged her to a motel room. She had woken up and she tried to run away, but he smacked her in the face twice and screamed, "How dare you? You're a rag, bitch." A rag is a really nasty word to call someone. It's supposed to mean used and slept with by everyone. He continues, "Should I break your leg for you to listen? If you don't act right for me, you won't survive. I will carve out your private parts. Behave like you did with the other directors." He assaulted Sora, allegedly, while forcing her to watch X-rated movies. Each time, the assaults lasted several hours, and it said that they would make threats to Sora the entire time, saying things like, "I'm gonna kill your mother, I will kill your sister, I will set fire to your house with everyone in it." Some of them even took videos and pictures of the assault and threatened to post them all over the internet. In a very sick detail, it stated that some even threatened to assault her younger sister while they were assaulting her. And not even just that, the mental and emotional torture and humiliation continued on set. Now, from these actions, 9 other useless pigs were inspired to harass Sora. So the casting directors are going around telling everyone on set what they've done to her, and they're laughing about it. And so 9 other predators decide, okay, let me try the same thing. They would grab at her on set, grope her. They would grab her hand, place it on their private parts. They would spy on her while she would be changing in the dressing rooms for other scenes. One of them even had the audacity to grope her and said, "You're fat. If you want to sleep with me, you should starve today and lose some weight."
Aber besser nicht.
Another one tried to
Besser
humiliate her by
zunehmen.
calling her a mop and taunting her that he knows. He heard from everyone about her hair situation down there. Another one groped her and said, "They are big, so the rumors are true. I like them. You should come live with me." It is the common belief that Sora descended into a psychological break and mental break from all of the torture that she endured in a very short amount of time. And she met with these people every single day because she was working like 5 different dramas. And when she wasn't being R-worded and dragged to motel rooms, she was being assaulted on set, just in the open. Like, even just researching makes me sick to my stomach, so I can't even, Sora tried everything that she could, and this is the heartbreaking part. And I can't help but feel like this intense amount of pure female rage, because let me give you a brief timeline of events. Director Lee assaulted her August 10th, August 18th, August 23rd, September 5th, September 20th. On September 24th, Sora met with a therapist. October 6th, she was essayed by Director Taegum. October 7th, essayed by Director Kim. On October 8th, Sora met with another therapist. Then alternating between the predators Yang Taegum, Kim Sun-mo, and Kim Yo-won, it's alleged that Sora was assaulted October 11th, 13th, 17th, 19th, 24th, 26th, 27th, and then November 7th. On November 9th, she would meet with another therapist. November 18th, she was essayed once more. And on November 19th and 26th, she would meet with a therapist again. Her medical staff at the time said in a recent interview, "I remember Miss Young as a special case patient who developed her disability due to excess stress in a short amount of time." Now, a lot of people also speculate that if Sora was drugged heavily during the span of the past 3 months, that could have intensely contributed to her psychological breakdown. Side effects of date rape drugs include memory impairment, impulsivity, anxiety, depression, stress, paranoia, and I'm not sure if she was drugged. We can't say that we have the exact evidence because you'll see why later, but I can see that to be, because it's just so different from who Sora was for 30 years. And I don't even know the exact words to describe how Sora's mom felt, but she still held out hope that Sora would recover. It's not going to be easy, she knows that, but we're going to do it as a family, and the police are going to get us justice. Sora is going to sue the perpetrators, make them pay for what they've done, and closure is going to be the first step to healing. In Korea at the time, the laws have since changed, but in Korea at the time, let's say you're walking down a street and you witness someone getting essayed in broad daylight. You cannot, as an eyewitness, report it to the police.
What?
Only the person being essayed can report to the police.
WTF, was?
Like, what do you mean? Like, I can't call police?
You can call them, but you can't file a report. You can't, push into motion a series of events where the perpetrator, the R-worder, gets arrested. The police will be like, "Were you the one that was essayed? Okay, then all we can do is just kind of stand here." The victim has to be like, "Hey, I was essayed." Yeah. Let me tell you the sick reasoning behind why. It's really bad. So back in the day, even if there were security cameras or eyewitnesses that caught the R-worder committing the physical, mental, emotional, violent, sadistic act of rape, unless the victim themselves doesn't file the charges, law enforcement does nothing. And according to some brainless idiots back in the day, they said no one can really know what happens between a man and a woman in private. That's why unless the victim said, "Hey, I didn't want this," they won't do anything about it. Yeah.
Ich finde, das ist eine Sache, die kann man auch später klären. Bei einer Anzeige.
Like just 365 days. What? So Sora's mom helped Sora file a complaint December of 2004 against 12 officials from the entertainment industry for sexual assault and forcible harassment. Now, obviously, the entertainment company that they all worked for was alerted of the situation. The vice president, a man, fired the 4 casting directors who was accused of sexual assault, but he stated, I talked to them. 3 of the 4 accused of sexual assault admitted to having intercourse, but they denied it was assault.
Ja, würde ich an deren Stelle auch sagen.
Sora telling her, "It's okay. The police are going to look into it, and once they discover the truth, these men, the 12 men, they're going to pay for what they did, and you don't have to feel scared anymore. You don't have to feel paranoid. You don't deserve this. You have rights. You are the one. You did nothing wrong." Mrs. Yang's only hope comes crashing down when the police call her, asking her if she's got evidence that she wants to bring into the station. That sounds like they care, right? They're building a case. They want to gather the evidence. And they want to get the perpetrators. But then they sarcastically added, "What, do you need 3, 4 trucks for evidence? We can send you 4 trucks for you to fill up."
Oh my god.
The investigating officer was obviously being sarcastic, insinuating, "What kind of evidence do you have? You're making a big deal out of nothing. You think your case is so serious? You think we want to put our resources to your daughter who just sleeps around?" Mrs. Yang ignored it because, she's thinking, maybe this investigator is weird. Maybe this is how he talks. I don't know, right? Maybe he's being genuine. Maybe he's a rookie and he's like, no, genuinely, I don't know how many trucks evidence needs, right? So still thinking that law enforcement is going to be on her side because, I don't know, that's their freaking job that they get paid to do. She brings in boxes of material, boxes of evidence, and the detective slams his hand down on the desk, startling Sora's mom. And he screams, do you think this is even a case? Because of how harshly the investigator slammed on his desk and started screaming at Mrs. Yang, everyone in the police station stared and turned and just looked. Nobody stepped in to help. Nobody stepped in to be like, hey, cop, like, get in the back. What's wrong with you? That's not how we do our jobs. No one. The other cops were just like, oh, okay. In hindsight, Mrs. Yang would say, this was the moment I should have dropped the investigation. Had I done that, both of my daughters would still be alive. The police discarded most of the evidence that was turned in by Mrs. Yang. They just threw it away. And understandably, she did not know how shady they were, so she didn't make copies of a lot of the evidence.
No.
Yeah. The police investigated for...
Is that legal?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's probably one of those things where it's not legal, but like, what are you going to do? Call the cops on them? Right? And if the government, like the state officials don't want to do anything, then...
Wow.
The police did investigate, though. They investigated for over a year. And like heavy quotes on the word investigated, if you can really even call it that. The first thing that they did was bring in the victim and one of the accused perpetrators, stick them in the same room without a proper partition. It was just one of those like plastic see-through sheets that you see at cash registers when COVID was really bad. That was what was between them. They were sitting at the same desk. Sora was forced to sit close to a perpetrator, so close, she could hear his breathing. And the detective was getting agitated that he had to actually do his job. He had to actually work and investigate because now he's frustrated. The victim is stating this happened and the perpetrator, of course, is denying it, of course. And he says, here's a ruler, here's some crayons, draw his private parts. We want it in exact millimeters. And he says, we want the exact shade or we're not going to believe you. I don't think I have to voice everything wrong with this, but it's just ridiculous, even if they are being serious, which I personally think that they're 1,000% trying to humiliate and ridicule and traumatize Sora further. But even if they're being serious, it's just dumb. I don't know what else to say. It's cruel and dumb. Even professional artists have references. I mean, as someone who's been with the same partner, and Mrs. Yang brings this up, like married couples, they can't even do this at gunpoint. Like you would utterly fail. I would utterly fail. I don't know. Like millimeters exact, like what are you saying? And this is the most traumatic moment of your life. You're trying everything to block it out. Your brain is trying to protect you. And this is what the officer is telling you to do? Like, yeah, that would drive anyone crazy. In another interview, if you can even call it that, investigators told Sora she's 재수없다. So this is interpreted in two ways. If we were walking down the street and a bird pooped on your shoulder, I might look at you and say, 재수없다, which means like, just like really bad luck. Like you got no good luck. Like you have such bad luck. It's a little aggressive. Honestly, I don't even think I would say that. It's kind of a little weird. But let's say we're walking down the street, nothing happens to you, and I look at you and I say, 재수없다. It's commonly interpreted in Korean as, you're so full of shit. So he was probably arguing, I was saying, no, she just has bad luck. But it's clear he was trying to say like, you're full of shit. After she gave her testimony of being assaulted by 12 men. I'm going to give you a quick list of the things that the police did during the investigation. I'm sure there's a lot more than what I've just compiled, but even this is really, really bad. In order to drop a complaint, you have to sign an official document that states that you understand that you're dropping charges against the perpetrators, or the so-called perpetrators. You have to add a fingerprint on the document, so you gotta stick your thumb in ink. It's gotta be like notarized, right? One of the detectives smeared ink on Sora's finger and tried to get her to close the case, forcibly. Imagine the trauma of being a woman, a victim who has been taken advantage of physically, and now someone is trying to do the same thing, not in the exact same sense, but they're trying to have power over your body again. Like the trauma of that. During another cross-examination with another perpetrator, where for some reason Sora was present, they basically forced her to be at every single cross-examination in front of her perpetrators with no barriers in between them, and it was all spaced out. So they investigated for 13 months, and I think once a month they would call her in. So every month, if she made any progress at all to get some closure and healing, she would be right back at the police station face to face with one of her other perpetrators. She's not even just talking to the police about what happened to her. Once a month, she's meeting with her attackers face to face. And think about it, SA is incredibly destructive mentally. The victim feels like they are in a position where they did not have power over their own bodies. And in that interrogation room, Sora she was not able to face her attackers with dignity. She was not able to face it, because you hear stories of victims finally going to trial. And it's a moment that they can reclaim that power because they're in a position where, no, you don't have control over me. You can never do this to me or anyone. She doesn't have that. Even the police aren't on her side. So think about how helpless and vulnerable she feels over and over again for over a year. A lot of experts said that this type of trauma would have probably left her feeling like she had been essayed all over again once a month for a year after her traumatic 3 months by the same perpetrators. During one of the cross-examinations, the detective asked the perpetrator to describe the sexual acts that they engaged in because all the perpetrators admitted to what they did, but they tried to argue that it was consensual and she wanted it. The perpetrator described every single bit of the assault in great detail right in front of Sora and even made explicit noises to go along with it. Not once did the police stop him. By the end of that cross-examination, Sora was crying and screaming. Her mom stopped it, took Sora home, where for days she sat in a trance-like state, refusing to eat anything, just laying there staring at a wall. Even just by looking at her psychiatric treatment progress notes, Sora was clearly breaking even more from the police investigation. Side note, again, Mrs. Yang blames herself for that, but I disagree. I think this is the police's fault, clearly, right? I mean, in the treatment progress notes, the medical staff wrote that Sora was reporting feeling heightened anxiety and nightmares after looking at the faces of her attackers again. She said when she hears their voices, all she can think about is when they locked her in those rooms and did what they did to her. I mean, clearly things are not going well. After yet another traumatic incident at the police station, Sora runs out, breaks free from her mom, and runs directly onto oncoming traffic right in front of the station. All Mrs. Yang could hear was her heart thumping in her ears and all the car tires screeching and cars honking, and thankfully, they were all able to stop in time. Sora survived. But it's just crazy. I think it's a global problem. Women and children are not being protected by law enforcement. SA crimes are not. It feels like the vast majority of law enforcement just do not care. In 1998 in South Korea, a crazy verdict was given on an SA case. A minor was R-worded by another minor. And the verdict of that trial, 1998. I know it sounds like a long time ago, but think about this. The statement the judge gave was, the two parents of the two minors should let them get married.
What?
They were like, basically, they were insinuating that the victim's body was wasted since she was violently attacked by a criminal, so she should just marry the criminal and live the rest of her life in utter fear and trauma.
What?
Yeah. Because if you're not a virgin before you get married, it's going to be rough for you, was the sentiment. Court is dismissed. And just side tangent, okay? There is such a strong stigma around SA. I mean, if I told you a man had been physically assaulted, mentally and emotionally tortured, and the perpetrator had inflicted biological terrorism on his body, we would not ask that man, were you drunk, sir? Sir, what were you wearing? Your basketball shorts were a little short, sir. Are you sure you didn't want to be terrorized like that, sir? But that's what SA is. It's assault. And it should even be categorized as bioterrorism. She cut chlamydia from her assaulters because you can spread diseases into the population non-consensually and with force. That's literally biological terrorism. After witnessing how her daughter was treated by the police for being the victim of violent sexual crimes, Mrs. Yang asks us this question. Is this really a country where you can raise a daughter? The number 18 in Korean can also sound like a curse word. 18 is 18, right? Which I'm not going to say the curse word in Korean. It's a little aggressive, but just imagine 18, but instead of the P's, you have a soft B. And it can mean fuck you. In English, it seems a little more casual. In Korean, it's a lot more passionate. It's a little more aggressive, right? It's amplified. Now, the number 28 is said to also kind of sound like the word fucking in Korean. Sora jumped from the 18th floor of their apartment building on August 28th at 8:18 p.m. All the numbers lined up were 8, 18, 28, 8, 18.
Ein größeres Fuck you kannst du auch nicht sagen.
As a way to say fuck you to the world. Fuck you to what the monsters did. And fuck you to the police that poured salt on her wounds and created new ones. And to the justice system that didn't even help her. And to every single person that shamed her for being a victim of a crime. She said to them, fuck you. Mrs. Yang had to be tough for Sojung. She just lost her daughter, yes, but her youngest daughter just lost her older sister. Sojung was now 30 when Sora passed, and she just lived with this immense guilt. She cried to her mom that it was all her fault. She was the one that suggested the two go be extras on drama sets. She said if she hadn't done that, they would have never dipped their toes into the industry, and she would still be here. She would be smiling, alive, happy, healthy. And her mom told her, never think like that. Instead, let's focus all of our attention on the good moments we had before everything happened. So on the 6th night without Sora, Mrs. Yang and Sojung, they laid in bed together. They had a picture frame of Sora in between them. And they would alternate between crying and laughing. Sometimes they would start laughing and end up crying. And they were just reminiscing of all the little things that Sora would do. All of the ridiculous fights that they had gotten into that seemed like such a big deal at the time. They were borrowing each other's clothes. That's my pencil case. Mrs. Yang dozed off for a bit. And when she opened her eyes, Sojung was still wide awake. She didn't sleep at all that night. And she said, Mom, did Onni shower the day that she died? What do you mean, did she shower? I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. Let's just all meet in 20 years, right? What does that mean? I guess if 20 years is too early, we can all be rejoined in like 30 years. Sojung got up and went to take a shower. She was in there for a very long time. That day, she would jump from the 13th floor of a building in Seoul. Her note to her mother read, Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to follow my sister. I just miss her so much. Mrs. Yang remembers that day with bitterness, not just because I'm sure it was one of the most traumatic, painful days that any single human could experience, but because she feels like she should have known something was going to happen. She says that she should have done something to try and stop it. She said, why didn't I think that my younger daughter would die too? Why didn't I save her life? About the shower comment, it felt like Sojung wanted to retrace her older sister's steps the day of. And I know the comments and questions feel strange in hindsight, and it's like, oh, didn't the mom notice that she was asking all these weird questions? But it's been 6 days since Sora passed. I don't think Sojung was displaying an abnormal amount of grief during that time. Imagine you just lose a family member. Your loved one is expressing grief, and you're like, well, I don't know, you might try to do something, so let's stick you in a psych ward. Like, you wouldn't do that. That could be a new breaking point for that person. Mrs. Yang was just trying to be there for her kids. So on September 3rd, 2009, less than a week after Sora died, Sojung passed away, and Mrs. Yang's life was in pieces. And the back-to-back deaths of their two daughters deteriorated Mr. Yang's health. So apparently during Sora's fight for justice, Mr. Yang kind of faded in the background. He resorted to drinking a lot to try and forget his pain. He had a brain hemorrhage. He had been bedridden. He could not get back up. The stress and the toll of the drinking and all of that, he didn't recover well from his hemorrhage. Studies...
Muss mal kurz mit Hundi drauf. Ja. Ja, es regnet. Wir brauchen Junis nicht so lange.
Have shown that psychological pain has such a profound effect on healing that even hospitals don't even really know how to adequately address it. On November 2009, just 2 months after his youngest daughter's death, Mr. Yang would pass away too. And for a while, it felt like Mrs. Yang had no one, not even relatives. While Mrs. Yang wanted to put her life on the line and talk about the injustice that her family went through, her relatives were mad at her. Some of her own, closest siblings, they were saying, why are you making our family look bad? You're filling our family with problems. They're gone. There's nothing we can do to bring them back. For a while, Mrs. Yang kept quiet and she harbored all this anger and pain by herself. She lost 81 pounds. It was just so quiet when it was time to eat, and the air just felt so suffocatingly heavy. And she was just alone in that house. She went to all these doctors, got prescription pills. They were so strong that she ended up just sitting there drooling and crying at the wall. She felt like a shell of a human. She would stare at the wall or the TV all day, feeling numb. So imagine, a year of this. A year of being in a house where every nook and cranny is a remnant, a memory of your family that's all gone. She's heavily medicated. She can't even eat. She's losing all her family members. And boom, the end credits to a new drama are rolling, and it's one of Sora's perpetrators' names listed as a director. Because of these men, her daughters had become a handful of ashes. But here they are, living their lives as if nothing has happened. Some of them even had children of their own. Children. Mrs. Yang felt like she was going crazy. She even changed her name. Not because she didn't want them to find her or anything, but it's an old superstition that your name can carry good or bad luck. And she said, maybe my daughters died because my name is unclean. She said she would have given up anything for her daughters, her name, her life, anything. And that is why Mrs. Yang started her one-person protest. She would demonstrate with a huge sign showing the names of 12 perpetrators who harassed and assaulted her daughter. Every demonstration, a cop would come up to her and say, I'm a cop. I got a report that someone is defaming on the streets. The police are really worried about all the wrong things. Yeah, defamation is a serious issue, but first of all, I don't think that this is defamation. And second of all, if you were to tell me, is defamation worse than essay? It's really clear. During another demonstration, allegedly one of the family members of the perpetrators came up to Mrs. Yang and tried to slap her in the face with his palm. It's like the brother of a perpetrator, while swearing at her. One of the perpetrators even stated, I will make her a beggar by suing her for defamation. The next time she's on the street, she's going to be asking for money and food. She did get into a physical altercation with one of the perpetrators. There is a YouTube video on it on her channel, and she ends up fracturing her wrist because he shoved her during a protest. One of the wives of the pigs called Mrs. Yang and threatened to sue her for defamation. And when Mrs. Yang tried to explain to her the situation and how terrifying of a person that her husband was, the wife responded, I don't care what he did as a bachelor before we got married. Even the police officer that worked on the case and did, in my opinion, one of the worst jobs I've ever seen, if you can even call it a job, he also stated that he would sue Mrs. Yang for defamation. And this part is crazy, but Mrs. Yang went to see one of the detectives thinking, okay, maybe after 5 years, he'll apologize. After 10 years, he'll apologize. Maybe he'll find some salvation somewhere and come to his senses. She showed him portraits of her 2 daughters, and he insisted he doesn't recall a single thing, doesn't remember them. And he started filming her, threatening to sue her for defamation. In Korean, there's an expression, he who farts in the room and gets angry at everyone else for the smell. Mrs. Yang felt really depressed again. I mean, this is the evil, angry scum that her daughter had to deal with. In the span of 6 months, Mrs. Yang had lost her whole family. She lost her oldest daughter, her youngest daughter, then her husband, and she said that she felt like she was always gasping for air and struggling to get a deep breath in. Imagine being in a constant state where you feel like you're half drowning all the time. The only reason that Mrs. Yang stayed for so long instead of joining her family was because of one of Sojung's dogs. They still had a dog. Sojung had brought home this tiny little puppy a while ago, and they named him Pee-Pee, right? Which I feel like could mean a lot. I feel like he was a little rascal when they first got him because the name sounds very rambunctious, like a little troublemaker. And she said he was the last one in the family. She said she felt a duty to make sure that at least one family member lived a long life under her care. She brushed his teeth every single day. She looked online for best meals to feed dogs. The dog ate better than her. She would mix milk into his dog food to make it easier for him. She brushed his hair every single day. She absolutely treasured him. He lived for 19 long years before passing away. And that is when Mrs. Yang decided, it's time for me to join my family. And she attempted to end things, but she survived. And she said in that moment, all she remembered was Sojung telling her the day before when they were laying in bed together, before she passed, her youngest daughter told her, Mom, get your revenge. I think if anyone can do it, you can. You're strong. And so now, that is what she's doing. She's gonna get justice, and she feels like that's what the only thing she can and will do as a mother, no matter how hard it is, no matter how lonely it is without her family. And it's been really hard, okay? Mrs. Yang waged a lawsuit against the perpetrators, April of 2014. Now, there is a part of this that I couldn't bring up earlier because I wanted to be wary of people thinking this was some sort of argument against Sora, but during the 3 months of Sora's torture, Sora purchased a ton of, quote, gifts for one of the directors. Nike shoes, hats, tech gear, clothes, cameras, sunglasses, watch, even gifted one of the directors like $1,000 in cash. Now, this is a detail that I'm sure the perpetrators would love to spin and be like, oh, she had a crush on me. But it was very clear that Sora was threatened. She could not say no to these people. They threatened to cut up her face, light her family home on fire, kill her own family, and assault her younger sister. So yeah, I don't think she personally bought these items because she very much enjoyed the company of these scumbags. One of the directors was even threatening her, trying to get her to give him the deed to their family home. These were all alleged in the lawsuit, but Sora's mom's case would be dismissed because the statute of limitations had already passed. Now, remember how some of the perpetrators wanted to sue Mrs. Yang for defamation? Well, they did. They tried to sue her for over $100,000, stating that Mrs. Yang had ruined their reputations and made them lose out on work due to her one-person protests that she would do in front of their agencies. Yeah. They would also allege that Mrs. Yang was doing this all for money. Also, Mrs. Yang is in her 70s and she's a very beautiful person, and they tried to argue that she's trying to make money off her daughter's death and get plastic surgery, which I feel like tells us all we need to know about these pigs. Imagine your children pass because of SA and they're like, no, you're not doing this for justice. You're doing it because you want to look pretty. These are like caricatures of evil, disgusting villains. Also, they tried to argue that it was consensual and that they were just so attractive, and Sora even offered to pay for the motel fees herself. Thankfully, the judge dismissed, threw their lawsuits in the trash can where it belongs, and stated, I cannot help but feel deeply frustrated and sad at the disastrous failure of public power. As a person in charge of public power, I express my deep apology and sincere consolation to the mother. The judge read out a 2-page paper about the failure of justice and deemed Mrs. Yang not guilty in defaming the perpetrators.
Wenigstens einer.
The principal that they even filed defamation charges, she felt like the perpetrators were trying to kill her daughters twice. But Mrs. Yang's revenge had just begun. She wanted to reveal the inside story of the death of her 2 daughters to the world. I mean, she feels like she needs to. This is what her youngest daughter told her to do before she passed. She's doing this for her kids. She started a petition for the Blue House, which is like the White House of South Korea. As of March 2018, more than 200,000 people have signed the national petition to the Blue House demanding a reinvestigation into this case. Now, back in the day, if you got 200,000 signatures in 1 month, the Blue House would at least have to address that petition. That has since changed because of the new president. He doesn't even want to look at it.
No way.
Yeah, it's really bad. So she had 200,000 signatures. This was the 23rd Blue House petition that was formally addressed by the Blue House of South Korea. They said that they were going to reinvestigate. But in 2018, when the police began reinvestigating, the frustrating thing was because of how poorly the case was handled in the first place, in the first time when it actually happened, right after, there wasn't a ton of evidence left over. Like I said, the police basically trashed everything. They ruined all shots at a proper investigation, then and in the future. The police commissioner even stated that because of the statute of limitations had passed and the complaint was withdrawn while Sora was alive, they said basically it looks like a reinvestigation won't be possible. Or at least they won't produce any results, really. Mrs. Yang said, I never dreamed that there would be 200,000 people. I thought it'd be incredible if we got 100,000 people to sign. I just want to thank everyone. I'm a small citizen with no power, and I want to thank everyone just for knowing. Thank you so much. I'm glad I'm alive. There is no way to repay even a little of what we wanted from our children. But 200,000 people now know, and I will keep going until 50 million people in Korea know everything, for as long as I live. The state offered to pay for her daughter's funerals. So August 28th, 2018, she held a joint funeral. Mrs. Yang said, "F you" to the state for not doing anything. August 28th, 2018. She held a funeral, yeah. And of course, I can't conclude this episode without talking about the dark reality of the film industry. Mrs. Yang met with the ministers of state to try and get the men fired from their positions in the industry as casting directors. And one of them, the minister, sympathized with her but stated, "The system in our country and the police is that we focus on evidence." He apologized when Mrs. Yang started crying. She was devastated, and she said, 3 people are dead. Isn't that evidence enough? A lot of people echoed this sentiment. Moms came forward and said, when our daughters said they wanted to get into the industry, I would tell them, don't stay for too long, though. That means something eventually happens to you. It's just a matter of time. An anonymous assistant performer said that working in the industry for the past 10 years, harassment occurs frequently on sets, and everyone but the stars, like the lead and the supporting roles, everybody else, they have to hold their breaths on set and hope that it doesn't happen to them. A Yongjin committee survey revealed that only 1 out of 27 cases were dealt with legally. About half the cases were just swept under the rug so the victims wouldn't have to lose their livelihoods. 4 people assaulted Sora. 9 people harassed and assaulted her. 3 people physically assaulted Mrs. Yang when she tried to get justice for her daughter. They hit and shoved her down. 12 predators and 3 violent criminals. And the tragedy is that as of right now, not a single person that played a role in this horrific case has been punished. Many of them are still working in the industry. As of 2020, one of the perpetrators worked on the drama, "Dating is annoying, but I hate being lonely." Mrs. Yang rallied everyone to protest and boycott, and MBC, one of the biggest networks in Korea, reportedly terminated their contract with the perpetrator, stating that they were unaware of this incident. So they fired him. Then May of 2023, the drama Lovers came out. Lovers. Another perpetrator had worked on set. MBC banned them from accessing any future production sites and stated, since they were hired by a third party that they were unaware at the time of the incident, they stated that they will actually terminate the whole contract with that third party company in question to exclude any possible participation of a perpetrator moving forward.
Immerhin.
Also, this is really scary, but apparently one of the casting directors, Lee Young-gwang, is working in the administration department of a huge gynecology office in South Korea. Meanwhile, from all the lawsuits that Mrs.
Bitte
Yang
was?
faced from the perpetrators, even though they were dismissed, she had to sell her apartment to pay her legal fees. So please click the link in the description for Mrs. Yang's YouTube channel to get updates. I am hoping to meet her if I go to Korea soon, so I can give you guys updates there as well. And Mrs. Yang stated that she's going to continue to follow the perpetrators for the rest of their lives and continue to expose them. If the courts cannot punish these men, their crimes will be known to the public. That is her goal. She is in her 70s now, and she works out every single day to stay very fit and healthy so that not only can she protest every single week, but a lot of these perpetrators, they're a lot younger than her. And she said her goal is to outlive at least one of them so that she can dance on his grave. She said, "This is a country that does nothing for its daughters. The police even put my 2 daughters at risk. There is nothing we can do but talk like this. And there is something that I really want to tell women like my daughter. You should live and not die. You must never die. You must live." Even though 14 years have passed since her daughters have left, whenever Mrs. Yang is walking on the street and hears a girl scream, "Amma," she still turns around. And that is the story of the Yang sisters in South Korea. Please leave your supportive comments for Mrs. Yang in the comments. We're going to translate them, a bunch of them for her, and I know that she would love to see your support. And hopefully we can meet with her and protest with her when we're in Korea next. But let's just keep this story out there. Please go to her YouTube channel. Even if you don't understand Korean, I don't think you need to understand the pain that she's gone through, to watch these videos, to engage with her content. Please. And let me know your thoughts. And please stay safe. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday for the main episode. Bye.
Was hat.
Bada bing, bada boom.
The people outside this teenager's home, they're multiplying by the day. Day 1, maybe it's 5 people. Day 2, it's double. Then it's triple. And it seems like more and more people are coming out to this little girl's house and they're screaming her name. Some of them have posters. Some of them are just stringing together these very colorful sentences filled with just the most aggressive curse words that you could possibly think of. There were even rumors that someone was going to light the house on fire. Okay, the plan is we're going to light the house on fire and it's going to force this little girl to come out and essentially face the mob. She was only 13 years old when she became one of the most hated people in the entire country of the Philippines. A video had gone viral of this teenager yelling at and yanking the hair of a middle-aged woman. Moments later, that middle-aged woman and her son would be murdered.
Das ist aber schnell eskaliert. Wie ist denn das passiert?
As always, full show notes are available at RottenMangoPodcast.com. This case does take place in the Philippines, so we did get our researcher who actually lives there and speaks Tagalog to help us translate the sources. But as always, if anything was lost in translation or if you have more information about this case, please leave it in the comments. But there is a video of this incident that has gone viral, like not just in the Philippines, but it's on Reddit. It's known somewhat internationally. So I will say there is a bit of online discourse that is pretty intense regarding the parties involved. I'm gonna try to cover most of it, but it is pretty dark. So with that being said, if you've been like an original K-pop fan, you know the song "I Don't Care" by 2NE1.
2NE1.
Yeah, so it came out over 10 years ago, I want to say in like 2010. They've since disbanded, but this song was everywhere. I mean, it was obviously huge in South Korea, but it was one of the most popular songs in the Philippines. According to our researcher, you could not get into a taxi, you could not go to a restaurant, a mall without this song blaring every single place you go. And it was a bop. The song is very uplifting. It's catchy. It's kind of like this I don't care song. Like, I don't care about your opinion. I don't care at all. Like, I'm doing my own thing type of song. That is the iconic chorus. And it's the type of chorus that sticks to your mind after just listening to it once.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be someone's last words. The song, not even the words I don't care, but the actual chorus of the song.
Someone was singing that.
Yes, were her last words. In the video, you see a woman about 45, 50 years old, and she's practically kneeling on the ground, screaming, begging, like pleading with this man in front of her, just let me go. Let me and my son go. This little 13-year-old girl comes up to her. This is the man's daughter, and starts slapping at her arms and hands, even pulls her hair. And the little girl is standing there proudly over someone who is, many decades older than her. And this little girl says something along the lines of, you know who my dad is, right? So this woman, this 45-year-old woman, in one last act of defiance, looks at this little girl and sings the chorus of the song. Man, I don't care. And she would be murdered immediately afterwards, along with her son. Like, in the video, you see the murder take place. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the drama. Like, everyone at first thought it was so fascinating. It's the newest neighborhood gossip. They're all at dinners, they're at barbecues, they're doing their little neighborhood walks. Like, you know those two hate each other, right? What? No, they hate each other? So they would explain. Well, Janelle, the dad of the family that lives on the left, he hates Sonia, that middle-aged lady that lives right next door to him. The two families, they hate each other. All of Sonia's kids that are like 25-ish, they all hate Janelle.
Janelle is the little girl's dad.
Yes.
And Sonia is the neighbor.
Middle-aged woman.
Got it.
And she's got a ton of kids that are like 20-ish, 25-ish, so older kids, right? And they hate each other. And the neighbors are like, wait, I thought everyone loves Sonia. Well, not Janelle. He even tried to run over Sonia's grandkids. In the middle of a day, Janelle was riding his motorcycle back home. And they have to use the same road to get to their homes because they're neighbors. And he sees Sonia's little granddaughter standing with her uncle on the side of the road. Apparently, this is the neighborhood gossip, he starts stepping harder on the gas pedal. He's picking up speed. He's going way past the speed limit for a neighborhood like residential zone. He has no intention of slowing down. He zooms right past this little girl, less than a foot away from her. If she had reached out her hand, if she had even leaned a little towards the road, she would have been hit by the motorcycle. He was driving so fast, she actually ended up falling back from the shock and impact of like the wind. So it sounds like they all really, really hate each other, but the neighbors are confused. Why?
Ja.
So for a little while, it didn't make any sense, but eventually it would go to court. Apparently, everything had been fine until Janelle decided to buy a piece of land from Sonia. It was a lot. It was probably like 3 or 4 months of his salary. And Sonia warned him, okay, yes, this is a really good investment. As a realtor, I can tell you that. I think this plot of land is good, but it's gonna be a bit complicated. So the way that it's set up is this is a giant piece of land owned by one owner. Mm-hmm. He's gonna sell off little pieces of the land, but he's not gonna give everyone their deeds until the whole plot of land is paid for.
Mm-hmm.
So now if you buy it right now, this little plot A, we have to wait for all the other plots to not only sell, but for those buyers to pay in full.
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with that? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. But a year later, he's like, where's my deed? And that's how this neighborhood feud started. And so everyone's like, oh, wow, that doesn't make sense. So he sued her and took her to court, and then what? She ripped him off? Is that what really happened? Like, what's going on? He takes her to court for embezzlement. He says that it doesn't matter what she said. She did this to embezzle money out of me. I don't think that I'm ever going to get a deed. Even if she had told me it would take a while, it shouldn't take a year. Sonia, meanwhile, is arguing, I have no reason to do anything like that. My reputation in the industry is worth so much more than this. Everyone loved Sonia for being patient and friendly. She used to be a teacher before she transitioned into real estate, and she was just like this really nice mother, this really kind grandmother. She had no reason to want to trash her whole family's reputation and her career for a quick scam. She argued, I did everything by the books. There was even a representative from the government to witness the whole transaction. But no, Janelle went around screaming about some scam. And in the end, Sonia, because it's so like, in Korean we have this saying, it's like 더럽고 치사해서. It's like so dirty. And so I feel so dirty on the receiving end of these accusations that are completely baseless.
Yeah.
She's like, I feel so dirty. I'm just going to give you your money back. Like, just get away. Like, you think I wronged you when I obviously didn't. So just take the money. I don't even care.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what she does. She's like, okay, the transaction is null and void. Take your money and leave. But Janelle is still not satisfied. He actually tries to sue her for embezzlement once more. And the whole neighborhood is just confused. Like, okay, wait, he got his money back. But if he's still suing, maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe he is right. Because why would he sue if he's not right? Right? But everybody loves Sonia. She's always had a spectacular reputation, and she gave him a refund. So maybe she's not in the wrong and he's just a sue-happy weirdo. So like I said, in the beginning, very entertaining neighborly gossip. But once the passive aggressiveness between the two neighbors ran so high that even their own children were impacted, or the neighbors would feel this like unspoken tension whenever they walked past the two houses, now it was getting just way too much for everyone to handle. Anytime that you took a neighborhood walk, if you saw Janelle, if you saw Sonia or her son Frank, Sonia's son Frank is 25 years old. He's very close with his mom, and by default, he very much hates Janelle, and vice versa. Now, it's customary that these neighbors on their walk, they would duck their head and just walk past as fast as possible. It's just so awkward and uncomfortable, you know? That was most days. But there were a few incidents where they would have to step in and try to diffuse situations, like when things would get heated between the two families. One time it happened because Janelle's daughter, let's call her Ellie.
Is this the 13-year-old?
Yeah, so her real name is out there. I'm not going to use it. We'll call her Ellie. She was playing with Sonia's grandkids. And the kids, you know, they're teasing Ellie. It wasn't the nicest thing to do, but I don't think they were physical. I don't think they were like viciously, verbally bullying this girl. I think that they were learning. Like, I really am never that person that says, oh, they're kids, right? Because I don't believe in that. But I think it was a genuine instance of they're kids and they're learning how to tease each other. They're learning boundaries. It's an experimental phase. And I do think that they were kind of teasing Ellie without this vicious, malicious intent to hurt her. But Janelle sees this and he gets angry. Makes sense, okay? I'm sure a lot of parents would feel that way. He could have just walked over to these tiny little children and explained like, hey, this is not something you do when you hang out with people, especially not with my daughter. Like, I'm not going to be okay with it. You got it?
How old are...
Like 10.
Oh.
7, 8, you know? They're young.
Oh, yeah.
But instead, he stomps out the front porch, a face red with anger, and he's screaming, why are you bullying my daughter? Behave yourself or I will show you how demonic I can be. Sonia was so angered by the whole thing. And she's not saying, no, my kids can never do wrong. My kids didn't do that. My kids are angels. That's not what she's saying. She's saying that's not how adults speak to children. That is unacceptable. And it's well known and crystal clear that Janelle hates me and my whole family, like Sonia and her whole family, almost ran over one of the kids, and he lives in such close proximity. Sonia feels like she has to stand her ground so that her kids can feel safe in this neighborhood. She files a formal complaint, and since then, we have reached a territory of no going back. I think a lot of interpersonal relationships are like this, and I mean, what do I know? I feel like I'm learning things every day, right? But I feel like there's always a point of no return. And it's not even just, oh, you know what? This person is so toxic, there's no point of return. I think there's always a spot where both parties have gone so far, neither one can turn around. There's no U-turn anymore. It's almost become part of like your life, your character, your whole life story is like, oh, this is my nemesis. It's almost like a thing, you know? And now even going back or de-escalating the situation, it feels like you're losing. It's like telling the other party, okay, you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. It's kind of like an ego thing more than anything now. The only problem is, one of the parties involved was willing to kill to protect their ego. The week before Christmas, there was a massive boom echoing through the neighborhood. All the neighbors are like, what was that? The neighbors who heard the loud noise, they went silent. You know, their eyes are wide. They're like straining their ears to see if maybe I can hear some sort of scream or something. Some of them even went to investigate, and they heard laughter. Okay, so they're like, I see what's going on. They saw on Sonia's front lawn, her son Frank and a few other family members were just having a good time playing with a boga. I'm not Filipino and I've never heard of a boga, but our Filipino researcher was explaining it's kind of like a homemade cannon. That sounds dangerous. That sounds like a weapon. That sounds like a bomb threat or something. No, it's not. Okay, so technically they're illegal. Technically they are, but they're pretty common in the Philippines. And it's very similar to like a homemade firework, but not as scary. Okay, let me try to explain it because I feel like I'm explaining it and it sounds very serious. You take a bamboo stick or a tin can, very long one, anything that has like a long barrel shape. You take it, it's open on both sides. These are not instructions, by the way. I'm not giving you DIY guides right now, but many people will put a plastic water bottle or something on the other end. They'll spray some alcohol inside or some paint thinner. The point is to blow open the water bottle's plastic cap and create like this boom noise. So once you spray in the alcohol or the paint thinner, I think you light a small fire near, and then it lets out a big boom, right? So this is why it's illegal. It's not illegal because people were using it as weapons. Most people would have it at home and they would use it as like a pastime. They would have fun with it. It's almost like how people do fireworks at home. Technically, there's a million ways you could kill yourself with a homemade firework or an at-home firework show. So that's why they banned it. They're like, no, we cannot have this anymore. But the end result is not to hurt anyone. It is not a weapon. It's not pointed at people. It's pointed up into the sky. And ultimately, all you're trying to get out of this, and this is kind of important, is you're trying to make a loud boom noise. The person who makes the loudest boom noise is usually like, I won, right? Keep that in mind. You know how online there's this whole sentiment of, well, don't expect to look like a celebrity if you're not spending celebrity money. And I always thought that having a personal stylist was part of that. Having a fashion expert shop for you, know exactly what you like, what you don't like, finding the pieces that he's even staying at his mom's house. They're going to bring I mean, this man was no 5. He's got a wife. They're playing with the boga. Whatever. To me, it gets better with time. It's like a fine wine. Thanks, Stitch Fix. They just get me, and they'll get you too. Try today at stitchfix.com/rotten, and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/rotten. stitchfix.com/rotten. So neighbors, they stick their little heads out. Okay, Sonia's kids, they're all adults at this point. They're playing with the boga. Whatever, not a big deal. And Frank is a responsible guy. Like, he's known in the neighborhood as being this very, very put together son. He's 25, he's got a wife and a newborn, but they live a few hours away. The only reason that he's even staying at his mom's house was because there was more work in this town. So he would come here during the work weeks, work his ass off. I mean, this man was known to never turn down a job. He did construction. He did honestly anything that made any sort of money. And at the end of the week, he would drive home for 1 or 2 days max. Just practically drop any and all money that he made, all the cash he earned, and drive all the way back to start the new work week. It's kind of bittersweet for Frank. I mean, on one hand, he had to be away from his child. And then on the other hand, this is the only way that his wife could stay at home and not work and just be with the kid. So he never complained. He was not one of those people that felt like, I'm doing a sacrifice for my family. He was really well loved. So that particular night, it's Sunday, and Frank is getting ready for this very long work week ahead of him. It's 5 days of just breaking his back in the brutal sun. I know I said a week before Christmas, but it's the Philippines. It's still going to be very hot. He and his family decide, let's just let loose, you know? And I mean that very lightly. They decide, this is their version of let loose. They're going to bring plastic chairs to the front lawn, sit under the shade of a big tree out front, pop open a few beers, It's not even a ton of friends. It's like cousins came over. They're just going to goof around. And it was at this moment, one of the cousins asked Frank, hey, you got a boga? Frank's like, actually, I got multiple bogas. So he brings out a few and they start having this competition of who can make the loudest bang. And Frank was up first. He loads up the boga, shakes it up, points it towards the sky, presses the button, like releases it. Nothing happens. And his cousins are all cracking up. Like, this guy thinks he's tough. This guy thinks he moves bricks. And look at him. He can't even work a boga. And it was all in good fun. So Frank is like, okay, I got to do it again. He shakes it up, shoots it up, and bang. And now, this is not like midnight. The sun is still out. And fine, yeah, I'm sure as a neighbor, it's not the most pleasant noise. But I will say my tolerance for random loud noises in the neighborhood is the highest during weekends, during the day. It's like everyone's just letting off some steam before the work week. It's not like any kids are sleeping. Nobody's, sitting there doing their homework all afternoon. But when Janelle heard that very first bang of the boga, he's at home with his wife and younger daughter, Ellie. She's about 13. He freezes. And he feels like it's personal. It's a deep-rooted anger that is seething out of his bones. He knew it was a boga. He doesn't think it's a gun. He doesn't think it's anything like that. He knew it was a boga. He knew it was Frank, Sonia's 25-year-old son, but he felt like it was a message for him. They're telling him, oh yeah, we're going to be loud. And what are you going to do about it? They wanted him to hear it, and they wanted him to try and do something about it. And if he didn't, they were just going to completely disrespect him. So Janelle marches out of his house. He slams open the front door so hard it like bounces back towards him. And he stomps as loud as he can. And with each step, he's like building this rage. He's hyping himself up, how dare they? And he spots Frank, snatches the boga right out of his hands. And Frank's like, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Don't you know this is illegal? I'm confiscating this. Frank tries to de-escalate the situation initially. Janelle, there's no need to be this angry. Please stop being so aggressive. We were just trying to have fun, but if you don't like the noise, I can stop. Janelle looks around at Frank's family and friends, and they're all staring at him like he's some sort of crazy power-tripping guy. And ultimately, that was humiliating. It's insulting. And what does a wounded
Aber die
ego do?
Wahrheit.
A humiliated ego strikes back. Janelle leans back and punches Frank square in the face.
What?
And Janelle is a pretty big dude. I would say he might be pushing 200 pounds. Frank is pretty small.
Pounds, keine Kilos.
Now, you know how in the MMA
Weiß
fights,
nicht, wie
the
viel
fighters
Pounds
have
sind.
these very intense staring matches. Their faces are inches apart from each other. They're staring into each other's eyes. I thought it was goofy. I thought it was all for like photo ops and the press conference and to get more views. But there is psychology there. A lot of the MMA fighters said, I too thought it was goofy, but you actually learn a lot about your opponent just by staring into their eyes. It's an opportunity to see are they really confident? Is there even a moment where the stare down, they waver? Or maybe a slight second where you can almost see like doubt or fear flash before their eyes. When you're only focused on their eyes, you can see it. You can see a person's soul. That's what they said. The first person to look away is the automatic de facto loser, the submissive one. And that's what it felt like on this front lawn. It was like an MMA stare down. Janelle punched Frank in the face, and now they're almost scary still staring into each other's eyes, daring each other to do something.
Janelle and Frank.
Yeah. Frank's cousins are jumping up, trying to create distance between Janelle and Frank before it escalates even further. Neighbors are rushing out, hearing the commotion because, when Janelle punched Frank, people are screaming, there's chaos. And not a single person, because if you watch the video, it looks like something's going to happen. It doesn't look to me like this situation is going to naturally de-escalate on its own. But not a single person in the crowd, not a single cousin or neighbor, nobody called the cops. Nobody even said, someone call the cops, someone call the police. Because Janelle was the police. Janelle is a police officer. He's a cop.
Oh my God.
He also had his police-issued gun and handcuffs on him, and he was going to make use of his power to make Sonia's son, Frank, submit to him. You are under arrest, Frank. Frank stood his ground.
Well, that's why Frank didn't strike back.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Frank stood his ground. This is all unfair. You know, Frank is a little tipsy. Fine, that's not illegal. Okay, he's on his own private property. He's not out there drinking. He was of drinking age. And sure, using the boga was illegal, but it's a few loud bangs. Nothing, absolutely nothing warranted an arrest. Even if someone had called the cops on Frank for using a boga, they would have confiscated the bogas and given him a firm warning. That would be that. But Janelle is now physically grabbing Frank to throw him onto the ground, handcuff him, drag him to the patrol car, and arrest him. He's like, I'm gonna bring you into the police station. All of Frank's family, including Sonia, his 45-year-old, 50-year-old mother, jumps in trying to defuse the situation. And Frank is shouting, you think just because you're a police officer, you can do this? I think Frank was just fed up at this point. You know, he had seen his mom go through all of these struggles with Janelle, and this is the last straw. You can't just keep doing this, dude.
Yeah.
One of Frank's cousins even put his hand on Frank's mouth to try and focus on diffusing the situation. Frank's family genuinely is just in this mode of diffuse, 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 diffuse. Doesn't matter, diffuse, diffuse, diffuse. Janelle, calm down. Please just let Frank go. Like, we can talk about this rationally. There's no need to involve the police. We'll never use the boga again. Janelle looked around and he only started pulling Frank harder. And I wonder if there's some psychology to this, because as people are pleading with him, it's almost now, it's kind of fueling his ego. Look, I have the power and I can do whatever I want. Even when people are begging with me, I'm not weak. I can still do what I want. Sonia literally throws herself on Frank's body to shield him from Janelle. And she's screaming, what are you doing? Just stop it. Get your hands off my son. This was the point of no going back. Not because of Sonia's words, but Janelle was now too far into his power trip. If he let go now, he would be submitting. He would be putting on a show for these people. He would have been bluffing. In just one glance, he could see all the neighbors had come out, and they're all watching. This would be public humiliation, which for some men is the scariest thing of their lives. Not murder or being essayed, but rather being publicly humiliated. Which, don't get me wrong, no one wants to be publicly humiliated, right? I'm sure it's very traumatic. But to him, he'd rather die. Janelle is digging his feet in the sand, figuratively,
Zum
right?
Gärtner gemacht.
And he keeps pulling on Frank. Frank's sister Tasha rushes in and latches onto Frank. Janelle physically shoves her off to the point where she falls onto the ground. She's dizzy. And when she looks up, all the neighbors have gathered, creating almost this human circle around them. But they're all scared. They don't know what to do. I mean, what do we do? Call the police? Janelle is the police. Like, what do we do? Tasha looks at them and screams, take out your phones and start recording him. Record him. Janelle hears that and stares directly into Tasha's soul. He was pissed. But Tasha's like, I'm not gonna flinch. She challenged him. She squared up her shoulders, stared right back into his eyes and says, you don't have any right to arrest my brother. What are you talking about? Yeah, I do. Of course I do. Janelle truly believed because he was a police officer, he could arrest anyone at any time for any reason. Frank starts cursing at Janelle. Janelle is clearly abusing his power, and someone needed to voice that. This family had lived in the shadow of Janelle's anger and power trip for long enough. Janelle's wife and daughter eventually made their way out, which I genuinely thought, okay, this is the moment. Janelle has, even if he doesn't care for his family, which I feel like he doesn't because of his actions, but even if he doesn't care for his family, this is an out for his ego. This is a way for him to be like, you know what? I'm a better father than I am an egotistical person. And that would, again, make him feel superior.
Yeah.
So this is an easy way for Janelle to say, you know what, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to walk away with my 13-year-old daughter. You're lucky my daughter came out. But he doesn't. Not at all. Ellie, that little girl, pulls out her phone and holds it in front of herself like a shield, and she's recording. She starts getting closer and closer to Frank and Sonia, and Frank notices. He asks, almost in this kind of shocked, like, oyopso, ridiculous way, your dad's the one who's in the wrong here, but you're filming me? Unbelievable. The little girl ignores him and starts yelling at Sonia, the mom, someone who is 40 plus years her senior, starts screaming at her, shut it, just let it go. Ellie is 13. She's old enough to know what's going on, but I don't think that she was able to understand the implications of what's about to happen next. She does get a lot of hate for her role in all of this, but it's important, again, to remember this is a 13-year-old girl who is watching her dad get into a fight. She's probably scared. She probably thinks being aggressive to save her father is the right thing to do. And since her father was a policeman, and he seems like the type to brainwash everyone that, like, I'm the authority, I'm the law, I'm the person that enforces the law, and everyone against me is a criminal. It could be very likely that she thought whoever was fighting her dad was automatically the bad guy. But I will say it's not a good look. Ellie starts pulling Sonia's hair and slapping her hands, trying to get Sonia to let go of Frank so that her dad can take Frank to the police station. Sonia tries to very briefly reason with this little girl because just imagine how chaotic it is. And she says, you should be telling that to your dad, not us. This is our property. This is my house. Janelle does briefly try to push Ellie back towards her mom, but she doesn't move. She stands her ground and proudly says, my father is a policeman. Sonia looks at this little girl. There is not enough time in the world, especially not right now, to tell her that this policeman, your daddy, is not a good one. He's abusing his power. We did nothing wrong. You can't grow up just blindly following a uniform because some of them are very corrupt. How do you tell a 13-year-old girl that your dad is corrupt and is the evil one right now? But what do? Ignore her? I mean, what do? So Sonia just sighed and tried to lessen the tension. I believe she tried to lessen the tension because Sonia's whole MO this whole time has been diffusing the situation. She hasn't been provoking anyone. She hasn't been yelling curse words. She's been trying to just get her son out of the situation as safely as possible. She says, in response to, my father is a policeman. She sings 21's I Don't Care. But Janelle, he heard that tune. He turned. And maybe he saw something we didn't. I don't think it matters what he saw, if there was even anything to see. But maybe he saw his
Blaue gefällt mir nicht so ganz.
Maybe he saw his daughter look at him like, what now, Dad? Or maybe he just saw red. I don't know. But he looks at Sonia and screams, you son of a bitch, do you want me to end your life right here and now? Before anyone can respond, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out his gun, and fires. Sonia loses her balance, but she's still holding on to Frank. And before the first shot is even finished ringing in Frank's ears, Janelle pulls the trigger again, and this time it hits Frank square in the chest. Both Frank and his mom topple over, and they're almost laying lifeless instantly, just laying on their front lawn, not moving. But Janelle wasn't done. In front of his wife and his daughter, in a situation that even when they were alive, there was no danger to Janelle's life, Janelle takes a step forward and shoots Sonia's body again.
Das ist aber auch...
And so up until this point in the video, it's, you know, it's eerie because you hear chaos, you hear people trying to defuse, you hear neighbors, and everything just goes silent. Just silent. The neighbors, passerbys, they're like frozen in shock. Frank's family, they don't even move. They're still trying to process what just happened. Their brain hadn't caught up with their eyes. All they could see was Sonia and Frank laying on the ground, but there's no way they're dead, right?
They must be scared.
Yes.
Nobody's running away right now?
There's like an eerie silence, and then the spell breaks. Everybody starts making a run for it. Janelle is no longer human. He's the devil. He's no longer reasonable. He's a killer. He's no longer a cop. He is a murderer. Who's to say that he's not just going to turn around and take out the whole neighborhood in this power struggle? So most of the neighbors are running away, but a few run against the crowd and run towards Sonia and Frank.
The families?
Yeah, to check on them. They try and stop the bleeding while they called for help, but it was too late. Both Sonia and Frank were dead. The rest of Sonia's family had just witnessed their family members getting brutally killed in front of them just days before Christmas. And once they realized that their loved ones could not be safe, they turn around to face Janelle. But he's gone. He used the chaos to escape. But you can't escape the internet. The neighbors who were recording started posting the videos online. There are several videos of the incident, so there is no doubt that Janelle killed Frank and Sonia. That's not even really debatable. The videos would go absolutely viral in the Philippines just because of how graphic, just the severity of the situation. Janelle started feeling the pressure of being one of the most hated men in the Philippines, being probably the top fugitive at the time in the Philippines. He ran off right after the shooting, tries to run to his hometown, but ultimately ends up turning himself in. It's actually speculated that this guy thought if he turned himself in, the police would go easy on him because he's one of their own. Side note, sources also state that Janelle's brother worked as an officer in his hometown. So he specifically turned himself in there in hopes of getting some sort of special treatment, which didn't work. He was taken into custody, and Tarlac, the city where the crime happened, Tarlac officers came to get him. They tested his hands for gunpowder residue, which obviously tested positive. He was arrested. Now, when someone is arrested, it is pretty standard to do a background check on them. And not only was Janelle the world's worst cop, but he was a criminal. When this came out to the public, netizens were confused, furious, all of the above. Even before this crime, Janelle had an extensive criminal history, which I don't even know how he's still a police officer at this point, but he was charged with homicide just a year prior in 2019.
As a cop?
As a cop. Sonia and Frank were murdered in 2020. He was charged with homicide in 2019, but for the 2019 case, there wasn't enough evidence, so the case was just dismissed. 7 months later, again, this is before Sonia and Frank's case, he was charged again with homicide, but this time the case was also dismissed. There's not a ton of detail on exactly what happened both times, but we do know that he was charged with murder on 2 separate occasions
Dann
before
bleibt der
Frank and Sonia's
Polizist.
murder. All the charges were dismissed because there wasn't enough evidence. That doesn't necessarily mean that there was no evidence or that it didn't happen. Just not enough evidence made it to the right people's hands.
Just not enough people who recorded it.
Exactly. Outside of Janelle's criminal record, he doesn't even have the best track record at work either. In 2014, he was briefly suspended for an entire month from the force because he refused to take a mandatory drug test, which, you know, the only reason you refuse to take a drug test, typically, is because you did drugs. Like, I truly have no idea how this man was still a police officer in 2020. Janelle clearly knew the video was posted. He knew almost everyone in the Philippines knew about what he did, but he still pled not guilty.
Da kannst du ja mal
There was so
probieren.
much pressure on the government. The entire judicial process was sped up because of it. The court found him guilty of 2 counts of murder, meaning he would spend anywhere between 20 to 40 years in prison, which honestly is not that long for what he did, but he will end up dead, so we'll get to it.
No, ich habe
Now,
da
I
oben
will
meinen Finger
say, the
vergessen.
next target for a lot of netizens
Naja, mach ich
was
noch rein.
Ellie. People ripped apart Ellie for the video that, you know, she's saying, my father's a policeman. I think her attitude, her demeanor throughout the video can come off a bit entitled, spoiled, maybe bratty. My dad's a cop, so you can't touch me. And a lot of netizens believe that this comment is what caused the murders. Had she not said that, maybe Sonia and Frank would not be dead. So she was ripped apart online. Now, if I had to play devil's advocate, right? I feel like Ellie said this because in her mind, her dad is a policeman and policemen always follow the laws. She's 13. She probably doesn't know that policemen can be corrupt. If he's doing this, she probably thinks there is a good reason that she's doing this. These people are probably criminals. And she doesn't understand why Sonia isn't letting her dad do his job. And maybe even her demeanor could be explained by, you know, when you're 13, you're scared. You try to act extra aggressive. You're like putting up this front. Also, I kind of feel bad in the sense that, let's say she was under the impression that her dad was a good police officer. If you see your dad kill 2 people, clearly not in self-defense, I think that would just shatter your whole reality. I think your whole father figure would be destroyed. You would question a lot of your previous life moments, life lessons. I don't know. I would like to hope that she didn't realize that her dad was in the wrong. and that she was just doing what she thought in her 13-year-old mind was appropriate at the time. I will say that smacking and yanking hair is never appropriate because Sonia was not even touching her dad. Yeah, Sonia was not touching Janelle. So I don't know. Maybe she has lived the past 2 years with a lot of guilt. Maybe she hasn't. But I do hope for the sake of, I don't know, I guess her own future and how she deals with relationships with authority, I hope she learns that her dad was wrong and that's just not how it works. Now, another thing about Ellie before we move on. After the incident, a lot of Facebook pages started popping up using Ellie's pictures and names, and these pages started posting some really crazy stuff. They were basically saying, I said what I said and I meant what I said, pretending to be Ellie.
Wow.
And I think that's why a lot of the Philippines really hated Ellie, not just for the video, because I think if they just see the video, they can kind of try to somewhat reason with Ellie since she is 13. But these Facebook pages, so many of them came up, so many of them seem so realistic that people didn't even know. How do we know it's not hers? I don't believe any of them were actually Ellie's accounts, but it did further add to all the hate that Ellie got. People started commenting some really vicious things. Like, they deserve the death penalty. Even the daughter, she's got no manners. The daughter of the police looks bitchy and arrogant. She even looked at the mother and son in a very disrespectful manner. How could they even face their neighbors after what they've done? You should have stopped your dad and asked him to bring you home, but instead you fueled the fire even more. Your father is a criminal and you're a spoiled little brat who knows how to speak English but doesn't know manners. Someone even wrote, honestly, you're the reason why your dad's rotting in jail. For God's sake, why did you have to get yourself involved in an altercation amongst adults? Yeah, it was brutal. The situation got so bad that Ellie had to go to therapy. A human rights group in the Philippines had to step in to remind everyone, hey, you guys know that you're cyberbullying a 13-year-old, right? There are some activities in life that I categorize in my brain as that's a whole day activity. Doctor's appointments, that's a whole day activity. That's all I'm doing the whole rotten fall at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to a $20 no minimum subtotal and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code ROTTENFALL. Don't forget, that's code ROTTENFALL for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. The Gregorio family, Sonia and Frank's family, and side note, Frank's wife was a few hours away when Frank died, remember? And she said that she absolutely refused to believe that Frank was dead. It just didn't make any sense. She had to physically bring herself to watch the video so that her brain could comprehend the message because her brain was not getting it. Her brain was like, everyone is just losing their minds. Everyone's lying. It's a joke, or there's a glitch in the universe and he's going to be back. He's going to be back home this weekend. And it almost took her to traumatize herself to watch that video to finally be like, okay, he's gone. He's not coming home. While the family were busy with the funeral, supporters were marching down the streets shouting for justice for Frank and Sonia. They grabbed megaphones. They demanded police reform, systematic changes. There was a little war going on in the Philippines at the time of Sonia and Frank's death, a war between the police and the citizens. So it's not like Frank and Sonia's was even a one-off case.
Oh, like
Yeah.
the police, okay.
And I'm going to tell you what's going on. So being an American, we are all way too familiar with police brutality. So obviously, this is not just an issue that's in the Philippines. It's a global problem, it seems. But there are some unique circumstances to this case. In the Philippines, in 2016, President Rodrigo Duterte, he was like, I'm going to crack down on illegal drugs. That is my whole campaign. Back then, illegal drug abuse was really prevalent in the Philippines. Numbers are not that easy to come by, for obvious reasons. But the U.S. Congress did an international narcotics report in 2010, and they estimated that the illegal drug trade was bringing in between $6 to $8 billion in the Philippines per year. Addiction had practically touched every major city. I mean, everyone knew what was going on. So when Rodrigo ran for president, he promised to change everything. I'm just going to tell you some of the quotes that he's the most famous for because I think that's the best way to get his campaign. I will repeat what I have said before. If you destroy my country and you destroy the young people by feeding them with drugs, you destroy the future. If you destroy the country, I will kill you. I'll dump all of you into Manila Bay and fatten the fish up. Just so we're all clear and the context is given, he's saying that he will kill all drug dealers and dump them into the bay. He also somehow tried to reference Hitler multiple times in his campaigns, in his war on drugs campaign, which is, he was quite literally promising to kill Filipino drug addicts. Just something to remember. Drug addicts are not dirty criminals who sprout out of the ground to just wreak havoc and destroy communities. I mean, these are brothers, mothers, students, neighbors. I shouldn't have to say this, but drug addicts are people. They're not the problem. They have an addiction, and that addiction is an issue, but the people themselves are not the problem, and you can't just get rid of them. So I don't understand why he thought that threatening to kill his own countrymen would win him the presidency. But the crazy thing is, it did win him the presidency. He did win the presidential election, and he didn't even stop there either. He kept going on about how much he hates drug users. And like, trust me, I'm not sitting here, guys, do drugs. But what's going on here? He would even say things like, do the lives of these criminals really matter? If I am the one facing all the grief, would 100 lives of these idiots mean anything to me? Rodrigo said that he would even kill his own children if they turned into drug users.
Jeez.
Side note, just to give you an idea of this man, there was another time in his presidency where the Philippines and China were fighting about who would control the South China Sea. Rodrigo's advisors told him, hey, you know what, if you're going to go up against China, it would be politically astute of you to become friendlier with the US, because you don't want to go up against China alone, right? It's not your war. He was supposed to meet with Obama to talk about it, but right before meeting up with Obama, Rodrigo publicly called Obama, and I quote, a son of a whore, publicly.
What?
Yeah.
For what reason?
So the reporters were like, what if Obama asks you about your human rights violations, because even the UN is looking into you, because, you know, you're killing a bunch of people just because you see them do a little bit of drugs. So what are you going to say to that? And he's like, I'm going to say, you're a son of a Obama heard it. He canceled the meeting altogether, stating that he would rather, quote, engage in constructive, productive conversations. Wow. Also, the Pope visited the Philippines. He also called the Pope the son of a
Oh, shit.
because he was causing a traffic jam.
Is he just like says whatever on his mind, kind of no filter?
I guess maybe that was his appeal. Maybe, I don't know. But I would say definitely calling the Pope a son of a is like crossing so many. I'm not even religious, but it feels like we're crossing a lot of boundaries, and it's a lot. That's very, very a lot, right? Now, the reason that people were upset and marching down the streets was because Rodrigo's attempt to end drug usage, he basically told the police force of the Philippines to go at it, have a good time, play Call of Duty on the streets. It's basically Valorant, free for all, the purge. He said, you see drugs, shoot and kill on sight. A little baggie of weed, shoot and kill on sight.
No freaking way.
And ever since then, the number of drug-related police killings skyrocketed. The estimated death toll of drug-related police violence during Rodrigo's presidency is over 6,000 people. But then what happens? What happens when you give people that level of power? Right. It's no longer about drugs anymore. Police officers got way too comfortable. It seemed like they just started killing whenever they felt like it, and then planting a little baggie of drugs.
Wow.
And nothing would be investigated, nothing would be looked into, nothing would be inappropriate. Those were their orders. Shoot to kill. They were caught multiple times. So there was one big case where 3 officers killed a young man, stating that he pulled a gun out on them and he had a baggie of drugs in his pocket. That turned out to be false. There was a tiny little camera in an alleyway that saw them drag him into the alleyway, shoot him dead, and then plant the stuff. They were just killing in cold blood. Yeah, not that drugs are a good reason to kill someone, but you get what I'm saying. So a lot of people argued this is giving power-tripping, egotistical, evil people like Janelle the go-ahead to feel like they rule the streets, to feel like there's some sort of God above all. So yeah, people had enough. In another angering turn of events, there were rumors that Janelle had benefits while in prison. They said that his status as a former officer didn't actually put a target on his back like a lot of people were hoping. It actually made his life easier. People alleged that he was given a phone with full internet access, he got haircuts in jail, received outside food, and even got a special cell, which I'm assuming is better than a normal cell. They stated that he was living with respect and dignity while he ruined an entire family. Netizens were rightfully upset about that. The Bureau of Jail Management had to come out and say, that's not what we're doing. And for like a whole year, it was kind of an argument until November 30th, 2021, Janelle's cellmates were carrying an unconscious body into the jail hospital. Janelle was already dead when he was carried in. The cellmate stated, well, Janelle was complaining about being dizzy and being out of breath the whole day. While we were all walking back to our cell together, he collapsed and lost consciousness. We don't know what happened. Initial reports state that Janelle died of a heart attack, but there are rumors, the main one being, netizens believe that Janelle was killed by other jailmates because he was being favored. And it's kind of pissing them off. And since he was killed for that, the Bureau of Jail Management would have to cover it up and just state that he died of a heart attack, because then it'd be like, now we have to explain why the jailmates or the cellmates were jealous of him. Yeah. So there was even a brief conspiracy that Janelle wasn't actually dead. That there were just photos of him taken as he was dead, you know, and he had escaped prison with the help of all of his other police officer friends, and he was probably living off the grid or living in a different country. Now, I don't know about this one. Normally, I don't like to entertain like, they're not actually dead conspiracies, because I feel like it could be detrimental. But I will say this one, I mean, I don't put it past these people, right? But it does seem that he is dead. The only reason I bring it up is Sonia and Frank's family briefly brought up that idea that they didn't think that he was genuinely dead. Ultimately, it does seem that the body in the morgue is Janelle's. Sonia's children have stated, it's just really hard. Like, everything's really hard. Sonia was she was a mom. I know that sounds so cliche because, yes, so many people are moms. But she was a mom in the way that you think of like a textbook mom. You would come home from work, doesn't matter if you're her kid that's 26, doesn't matter if you're her grandson that's 5, she would have this plate of hot steaming food waiting for you, and she would sit there at the dinner table. Doesn't matter what time, she already ate dinner, she's just watching you eat. How's your day? Like, tell me everything. All of Sonia's neighbors mourned her death. They said, this woman loved feeding people. They said, they're not a rich family. They're not doing well. Sometimes you could tell that Sonia didn't even have enough to eat. But if you ever walked by that house, even looking a little hungry, if you stopped by to drop off something and your stomach grumbled even a little bit, she would force you to sit down and she would make you feel stuffed, even when she was hungry. Everyone in the neighborhood called her Mama Sonia. But even through all the pain that this family has gone through, they came out to say they forgave Janelle. They said, we hope this serves as a lesson, you know, that helps him realize that being a police does not equate to superiority. No one is above the law. We've forgiven him. That doesn't mean that the pain isn't there. The pain is still there. We lost a mother. We lost a brother, just like that. For him, he's still alive. Well, he was. And he gets to see his family during visitations. But we don't. For us, we lost everything. But we've forgiven him. We've forgiven him because there is justice, and he will pay for it, and he will pay for it in the eyes of the Lord. So we are choosing to let go of that anger. But of course, we still condemn any and all actions even remotely close to this. So that is the story of the Tarlac shootings in the Philippines. What are your thoughts? I think just the song, all of it is just a mixture of, makes me feel so, I don't know, it's like heavy. Please leave it in the comments and please be safe. I will see you guys on Sunday for the mini-sode. Bye.
Bada bing, bada boo.
Dr. Tahir is a therapist that normally doesn't do house calls. But when you get a call from a wealthy business tycoon that holds a ton of influence and power in the area, you're gonna go. He didn't even just go alone, okay? Dr. Tahir brought 5 of his other employees from his clinic. The call was for the rich business tycoon's son, who was holed up in the mansion and going through something. It was very vague. The business tycoon was on vacation. He didn't give the therapist much to go off of. So when the team, the squad really, of therapists, they get to the home, they find out that the son is unwilling to let them in. So they wait outside for like 30 minutes. before the dad calls back and is like, you know what? I've got a ladder in the shed. Just break into the house. I'm not sure what they were expecting. Maybe they were expecting the patient to be on the ground, refusing to leave the house. Maybe they're having a panic attack. I really don't know. Maybe they're having a psychotic episode. That's not what they got. When all 6 of them entered the home, the son ran up to them, knife in hand, and jammed it up the chin of one of the employees. The knife went through the therapist's chin, jaw, mouth, and pierced his tongue, so upwards. He pulled the knife out, blood squirted everywhere, and the other therapists, they're like, okay, now we're gonna fight for our lives to make sure that this patient is subdued.
Nope.
They're grabbing
I'm out.
blankets, tying him up. It's taking forever to just get this man under control. He's got a gun, he's got a knife, he's got all these other weapons. Finally, when they get him on the ground tied up, that's when they saw the body of a young woman, a diplomat's daughter, tortured and murdered. Her body was laying in a pool of blood, and her head was found detached 3 feet away from her body. The patient would later state, what? She wanted to be sacrificed.
Was wollt ihr denn? Ging noch alles voll nach Plan. Das wollte sie so. Der Psychologe auch, der da mit dem Messer attackiert wurde, war das auch so
As
geplant?
always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. This case does take place in Pakistan, and we had multiple Urdu-speaking researchers help assist in gathering of the facts. There's a few points in the story where it's more speculative than factual because there were no eyewitnesses present during these key moments. So I'm going to try and present all the possible scenarios, and you can make up your mind on which you believe occurred. The Jaffer family in Pakistan could be on their own episode of Succession, really. Mr. Jaffer was an influential, wealthy business tycoon. His company specialized in massive construction projects, and it said that he had big military contracts, which anyone who's doing contracts with the military, automatically I'm like, these people are richer than beyond belief. He lived in this modern, guard-gated house with his wife and his 2 sons. They even had a whole staff to manage the home. Housekeepers, gardeners, kitchen staff, security staff. I really have no idea how deep their money runs. I can't find a net worth anywhere, but they do kind of give off that new money vibes. And I don't mean that in like a harsh, weird, derogatory way, but in the sense that, you know, they love to throw a good high society party. So during the weekdays, the family would focus on business. Everyone kind of did their own thing. Mr. Jaffer was always on business trips, doing big deals. Meanwhile, his 2 sons, they're living complete opposite lives. Okay, so on the weekends, they would throw these lavish dinner parties. Staff would be carrying in these giant vases of fresh flowers. The kitchen would be busy with teams of chefs crafting out the most elaborate seasonal recipes. And one by one, these rich families would just trail into the mansion. Some of them are old money families. Some of them are new money, respectable, influential families. And oftentimes they would bring their kids with them to introduce, to mingle amongst each other while the parents, I don't know, talk business. So these kids, they are true socialites. Most of them had gone abroad for schooling, whether it be in the US or Europe. They were all well-traveled, well-spoken, and very well-funded. And I'm sure, naturally, it becomes this unspoken competition amongst the parents. Whose kid just got accepted into that prestigious university abroad? Oh, whose kid just snowboarded with a celebrity in Switzerland? Whose kid is the most well-read? The Jaffers had 2 sons, but you would really only hear them talking about one. Zahir, crown jewel of the family. Even though he was the firstborn into the family of business tycoons, he wanted to study psychology. That's what intrigued him. He wanted to help people. So he gets his certification to be a counselor at a high-profile mental health organization called Therapy Works. He gave lectures and conducted counseling sessions for students in Pakistan. He held these mental health awareness sessions in well-known schools. I believe he even tried his hand on one-on-one counseling. But he still made time to work with his family. Whenever they needed him, he was the chief brand strategist at his dad's company at one point. He was born in the US, grew up in Pakistan. Before he started studying abroad, he was fluent in English and in Urdu, and he was the golden son, the golden child. So whenever the Jaffers boasted about their child's accomplishments, it was this son. The other one was kind of like the black sheep of the family. They tucked him away, closed the door, and he was the family secret. They never talked about him in public. It's like he didn't even exist. They honestly couldn't even comprehend how he was part of their picture-perfect family. He was admitted into a psych ward in his late teens, early 20s, diagnosed with schizophrenia, which, yes, is a very serious life-altering diagnosis, but it's something that can be treated. I mean, we've seen so many people time and time again get treated for something like this and live very healthy, productive lives. But when he was sent to therapy, nothing was working. And it wasn't even his mental health that was the problem. It was because he was addicted to meth. So, of course,
Das ist
nothing the
ungünstig.
therapist could do could really make a dent on his progress if he was addicted to meth. It
Das
was
stimmt.
reported that he would allegedly have
Das wird nix.
induced psychosis while studying abroad. At one point, he was even deported out of the United Kingdom for assaulting his own mother and potentially being involved in sexual harassment and SA cases in the UK.
Wow.
So yeah, the Jaffers never really talked about him. They only talked about perfect Zahir, who's now in his mid to late 20s. So he's like 27-ish. And he should start thinking about settling down. That's what they're thinking. You know, the parents started using these high society gatherings almost as a way to see if there was anyone that they could pair with their heir. Noor was one of the most respected, quote, kids at these dinner parties. She is the daughter of a former Pakistan diplomat. Her father was not just a very well-known, but also a very well-respected person in the political realm, which is, you know, pretty difficult to accomplish. And like all the socialite kids that would be invited to these parties, Noor was also very well-traveled. She lived most of her childhood in Ireland. She had an Irish accent. She went to school all over the world, even in South Korea. She was actually admitted into Ewha University, which is one of the most
Ihr klingt
prestigious
eigentlich
colleges
schul
in
auf
South
mehrere
Korea.
Schulen
She
in
studied
verschiedenen
in the
Ländern
US,
zu
just to name a
gehen.
few. She attended she loved studying. It's kind of weird, but it's not that she loved the act of studying. It's not even like that she loved grades. She was very interesting in the sense that she liked to acquire knowledge. She was genuinely passionate about learning new things. On top of that, she's a human rights activist, always attending local marches, rallies, very vocal for the causes that she believed in. So if we're talking about on-paper stats, Nora is as perfect as it gets. Educated, religious, activist, conventionally beautiful, kind-hearted, family-oriented, studious, the daughter of a diplomat, you know? And she could even bake on top of that. So it would make sense that Zahir would feel like, oh, you know what? I think Noor would be a great match for me. Zahir's parents seem to agree. This would be the perfect wife for their heir. They meet at one of these dinner parties, and it's pretty unclear when exactly they started dating or even getting to know each other. But sources state
Oh,
that
was
Zahir
denn?
struck up a friendship with Noor.
Regnet draußen. Wir gehen
They
nicht
become
raus.
friendly, and they officially become a couple in
Ihr wollt
2018.
eh nicht raus, wenn es
They
regnet. Ihr
had
dreht wieder auf der
the typical
Türschwelle um.
YA novel love story. Yeah. Zahir was like this rich, shy, kind of reserved person, but people said that Noor would bring out his spontaneous and fun side. And they're like, wow, Zahir actually cracks jokes. This is my first time hearing it. It's so interesting. Noor was also someone that didn't really care for money. I mean, she understood the value of hard work behind money. She wasn't one of those people that's like, oh, money doesn't buy happiness. No, she understood, but she just wasn't the type to spend a ton of money on material goods. And everyone could see why Zahir was obsessed with Noor. She was a little different. I don't want to say different because it makes it sound like she's a pick-me, and she's not a pick-me. She's actually a girl's girl. She had a girl gang. That's what they called it. I mean, her best friends, all of her friends were girls, and she would do anything for them. But she was just very interesting. The way that everyone describes her is very passionate about everything. Like, it's hard to keep up with her. You know, there's a few topics that I know a lot about, or I think I'd like to talk about, right? Noor loved talking about everything. I mean, she would come up to you bubbling with excitement to talk about the history of different countries' flags and the meaning behind each color of countries that aren't even on the same continent, and then turn around and just excitedly talk to you about how she discovered the perfect oven temperature for soft yet crunchy macaroons. And you're like, okay, this is a very multifaceted person. She had a lot of niche interests, which I think is incredibly charismatic. And Noor would do this thing, and it was kind of a running joke between everyone. She would go to the store every single week and buy these Nando's Peri Bites. They're like snacks. I imagine they're like chips. They've got a little kick to them, little, like, tiny bit spicy. She would get so excited, sit down, pop open the bag, take a bite, and excitedly say, "Oh my gosh, too spicy." But then her hand would be right back in the bag grabbing another one. And this would happen every single week, every time she went to the store. And all of her friends are like, just stop eating the snack. But she loved it. And everyone loved watching her eat the snack because it's the same reaction every single time. And so yeah, Zahir is completely, utterly infatuated with her during the initial stages of their relationship. I'm pretty sure it was mutual. Noor fell pretty hard for Zahir as well. And it's speculated that the Jaffars were really happy about the two dating. Noor was really a good catch for Zahir. They just hoped that she would never meet their other son. Zahir did a pretty good job keeping that side of him away from dinner parties. But how long could he really hide it? Zahir Jaffar was the only son and heir to the Jaffar family fortune. He doesn't have a brother. He is a complicated person. Zahir was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and while being treated, he earned his counseling certifications. He went from being a patient to a therapist at Therapy Works.
I see.
Yes.
So he did all of that.
All of that. He
But
was
on the outside, he's like a perfect son.
the good son, the golden child. Everyone's like, wow, how do we get a son like Zahir?
Wow.
On the outside, he's reserved, polite, treated those around him with the utmost respect, but he also occasionally assaulted his mom. He only ever spoke highly of women in public, but he also messaged female acquaintances things like, "I will titty f you till I slice off your breasts and nipples." He would
God.
call female acquaintances faces and bimbotic hoes.
To who?
Like his childhood acquaintances, girls that he grew up with. And they
Just
would
for
lose
no
touch.
reason?
Yes, they would lose touch. And then, they might be Facebook messaging and he's like, "Oh, when are you coming to town?" And then he would just bombard them with these crazy messages. And obviously, these women did not respond kindly to his messages because why would they? He would throw slurs at them. He would ask them if they liked performing services on male private parts. It was just really bad. But Noor didn't see any of this. She did not see this side of Zahir until it was too late. There's actually a video of them that has since gone viral. They're dancing together at a friend's wedding, and they honestly look like the perfect type of couple, like the type of couple that people would be jealous about. The wedding itself is lavish, it's grand, and you can tell that these kids that are having fun are part of influential, wealthy, affluent families. It feels perfect. It feels like one of those romance novels. They look like they're in love. Soon after, Zahir would behead Noor. Zahir had a one-way ticket to New York City at 3:50 a.m. So he was going to leave. He's like, "Bye, Pakistan. I'm going back to the US." So while the rest of the city slept, he would be getting on a plane, getting ready to start this new chapter of his life. But he's thinking, is that really what I want? It's kind of bittersweet. I'm sure a part of him was excited, and then another part of him is like, what about this life I'm leaving behind? So he picked up his phone and he called the person that he wanted to see most before leaving. July 18th of 2021, Noor was very busy. She's prepping for Eid al-Fitr, which is a Muslim holiday, and she was spending time with her mom, helping her prep food in the kitchen, and she gets this phone call. She excuses herself. It was Zahir. They hadn't spoken in 6 months since their breakup. They've been pretty no contact. So after 3 years of dating, they broke up and she's randomly getting a call at like 9 p.m. It was pretty rough for Noor, the breakup, but she knew she was making the right choice. Her friends kept reassuring her, we always thought that he was a little too controlling. At first, he was so sweet, but I don't know, he just gives me bad vibes. To give you some context, both Noor and Zahir are Muslim, but Noor was a lot more devoted to her faith than Zahir, and it became a problem when Zahir would... Okay, so it was speculated that Zahir was the one that encouraged her and if not demanded that she stop wearing her burqa. Eventually, Noor would break up with him, and now 6 months later, he's calling out of the blue and she doesn't know what for. She picks up the phone and he tells her that he's leaving for the US tonight. In about 7 hours to be exact, he would be on a flight to New York City. It's a one-way ticket. He doesn't know when he's going to be back. So this is at around like 9 p.m. Technically, his flight is the next day at around 3:30 in the morning. And he asks her, is there any way at all that we can just say goodbye one last time? For closure? I mean, we did it
Hi.
for 3 years. I just want